I can. Trying to raise it up a bit.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, there we go.
All
Yeah.
right. Welcome to a very special episode of Video Store Rejects. Normally, this is a podcast about directors' filmographies, one film at a time. But we often like to delve into other categories, and sometimes we've been talking about doing franchises. And today, we're going to talk about possibly the biggest movie franchise of all time. It is about to reach its sixth decade of films. The film franchise has outlived its creator, of which the sole material is based on. That's right. We're going to be talking James Bond today, and with me is probably the biggest James Bond fan I know, or a bigger fan than me. And I think this is probably the second biggest topic we have talked about throughout the years, other than Batman. A very good friend of mine and a good friend of the show, Pace Irvin. Pace, welcome back.
Hey, welcome. Or glad to be back. Glad to be back. Skip or give my dogs. They are, they saw a squirrel or something and they start barking.
Yeah, my dog was just going crazy earlier because another dog walked by and was barking. There's like a little Pomeranian that lives around our complex, and it just barks the whole time it's outside.
Yeah. It's like, how dare you? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. Where do we want to begin?
Oh, I mean, it's a lot to cover and a lot to kind of skim, but I guess we'll kind of. Uh, how did you become a Bond fan? I think Roger Moore's your guy, even though we both grew up in the Brosnan era. Like most people our age would say Brosnan's their Bond, but is Roger
Yeah.
Moore your guy?
Roger Moore is always up there. All the Bonds are very high up on my list. I try. It's like I kept going. How do you figure your favorite Bond? We can talk about that later. But you have to look at every one of their performances. You have to look at their movies. It's complicated. But no, for I remember this very clearly as a kid, and yeah, like most little kids, I had the attention span of a sea cucumber. But the opening of For Your Eyes Only was on the ABC Monday Night Movie. You're gonna remember it's the 1980s, so we're playing that. I'm sitting on my father's. There's this movie, and I'm like, what's that? And I go to sit on my father's lap. I must have been like really old. It must have been 88, I imagine. This was probably 88 because my sister hadn't been born yet, as I recall. So maybe it was a little later, but I remember being only about 5 years old and sitting on my, you know, father's lap, and I watched that opening scene, and where the land or where the sea mine hits the boat, and if I am so dyslexic that I get these names confused, I'm going to absolutely stomp myself in the face. But I just slap myself. That's the word. Slap myself. But yeah. But no, yeah, that kind of set the tone. And I think about a year later, I just thought that was so cool. But you're a little kid, you have the attention span of stuff. Didn't continue watching it, and then my grandfather got me a recording of the Man with the Golden Gun and Live and Let Die, and from there it was just off to the races. And I'm not lying when I said I've seen the majority of them at least 20 plus times. Because when you add in watching all of them on video and watching them all on those TBS, TNT, Thanksgiving, and I don't remember, I think New Year's Day, I think it was, they would just play all of them up to a certain point, all the way up into the Brosnan era. So yeah, I've seen most of them, the majority of them, at least that, and the rest of them probably between 7 and a dozen times. And I've read most of the books. The only one I haven't read is the only one I haven't read is the I think it's The Spy Who Loves Me.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but For Your Eyes Only is the most serious of the Moore films, and it's probably the most Fleming of the Moore films.
Yeah, yeah, it's actually very much. I love it because it's a throwback. I love it because you get all the charm of Moore. And Moore was, people will go on about Connery is this or this is this and this is that. I'm like, take everybody, look at them for what they were. And yeah, his stuff got really cheesy at certain points. But that's his Bond at his best. And I always wish I saw more of that side of Moore's performance. But yeah, it's definitely more serious. It's just a good throwback espionage movie. It's got one of the best chase scenes ever. That Sister on Tujibo is amazing. And the but yeah, no, it's and it's actually based off of two. They borrowed from two of the short stories, actually. So yeah, it's pretty, and then some other stuff, but there are definitely two that were very heavily involved with that.
Yeah, looking back at these movies, it's been a while. I didn't have a chance to watch as many of these as I wanted to in prep for this, but I wish this would have been Moore's last film. I understand why it wasn't, but I wish he would have gone out on a higher note than he did. And I think this was the first one I watched on TV. I'm gonna shame myself. My introduction to this franchise was actually a short-lived, either it was an 80s or early 90s cartoon series called James
James
Bond
Bond,
Jr.
yeah, that is, yeah. Well, I think that was the introduction for a lot of kids our age. If it weren't for the fact that James Bond was basically the movies of my father's childhood, that's the reason why I saw them endlessly, because he could sit down and watch them over and over and over. So yeah, so I ended up watching them over and over and over. So yeah, and I loved it. I took to it more than he did. It's like, yeah, but
Yeah, and
yeah,
that's another thing. I know a lot of people, especially male fans of this franchise, their introduction was their dad or their older brother or their uncle. For me, it was my mom. My mom loves these movies. And for whatever reason in the early to mid 90s, I remember the Roger Moore ones being on cable more than the Connerys, and it was For Your Eyes Only and Octopussy, I think, were the first two I saw.
they're
Like,
they're both they're both fun movies. I mean, Octopussy, of course, has the fight on an airplane, which is spectacular, and the fact that they had just invented a whole new form of parachute to make that work was really neat. Um, and of
yeah, that
course, the Bond girl in that, the female lead in that movie, is it Maud Adams? Is that her name?
yeah, Maud
She
Adams.
was
Now that is
she was
one
in
thing I do really like about that Bond film is even though there's still a significant age difference between her and Moore, it's not on the cringe level age difference.
Yeah, and the thing that's so interesting is she was in multiple Bond movies before getting that role, and I think
Yeah,
she may have
she's
been
in
in
Man
one
with the
more
Golden
after
Gun
that.
as well. She plays Scaramanga's girlfriend.
Yeah, I think she's in one other in a smaller role too. I can't remember, but she was cast more than any other, any of the other outside of Moneypenny.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
that
yeah,
one's a little frustrating for me, but for the most part, I enjoy all of these movies, even the so-called bad ones. There's only like 2 movies that I really just can't stand at all to watch.
yeah,
So, like, there
yeah.
are some silly stuff in Octopussy that kinda, like, makes me groan, and there is some racist things in there, but, it's fine. It's enjoyable, and the reason did you know that James Brolin almost was James Bond in this
Yeah,
movie?
James Brolin was almost one, and I thought it was very interesting. They tried to cast an American, and then that fell through. And
Well,
James Brolin is an amazing actor, but I could not in a million years see him as Bond.
no.
He's got the looks, but I just, and who knows, maybe he could have pulled off the voice. Maybe, I don't know, but I can't see him as Bond. I can't do it, but who knows? I mean, whatever, he could have been amazing possibly. I mean, if the Broccoli's
Possibly. I
if
do
the
know the reason they got Roger Moore to come back was because of the whole Kevin McLeary lawsuit and him making the unofficial Never Say Never Again, aka Thunderball redo with Sean Connery.
yeah, which is
And they're like, well, we
oddly,
can't cast a new Bond when Connery's doing like a renegade Bond movie. And so Roger Moore had to come back and do it, and Octopussy ended up making more money.
yeah, it was very interesting the way it ended up working, and oddly enough, despite the fact that it is a non-official film, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's one of those ones I saw a lot as a kid. I'd have to go back and rewatch it, but I remember it being not the worst thing in the world, you know.
It's not
But
the worst thing in the world, even though it's basically Thunderball again, and that's like the
yeah,
only plot that Kevin, whatever his name is, could do. But I'm gonna say something possibly controversial. I think Connery gives a better performance and he looks younger in Never Say Never Again than he does in Diamonds Are Forever.
I think he was having more fun in Never Say Never Again. I think that's what it was. And of course, Connery will always be pretty much the Bond for most people, and it's very difficult to top Connery. But when you get into who's your favorite Bond, that's a quagmire. People will get into fights about it all the time, and my argument is they're all good. They all had their different style. They all had their different stories. Some of them had better movies than others, but at the end of the day, all of them deserve the role. They were all cast correctly. I don't think that there was ever a
Yeah,
mistake.
I would say that even though for a lot of people, especially of the baby boomer generation, Connery, like my parents, Connery's always going to be James Bond to them. And he probably has a better consistency than most of the other Bonds because at, we got to also look at the time he was playing Bond. That's the height of the franchise, and they were like the Bond franchise kind of created the modern action movie, and at that time they were the best of the best.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I
And
agree, and I would
I think a lot of the other actors, they were having either tonal issues or script issues, and sometimes when it and every one of them has at least one movie that like, okay, yep, that's them, that's their character, they got it. And then other times it didn't quite work, but that's another interesting thing about this franchise is depending on who you talk to, the ones they like and the ones they don't like is gonna vary.
yeah. I mean, it's that's the thing. I mean, it's okay. So I was watching interest like a review. I was watching a review of, I think it was A View to a Kill, which personally I like. I like A View to a Kill. A lot of people hate A View to a Kill. I definitely think it's his weakest movie. It's definitely the one that Roger Moore dislikes the most. But I mean, I enjoy it. I like it. But because there's really, I don't think there's a truly bad Bond movie. There's some that are exceptionally weak, but at the end of the day, Bond. Um, and but the thing about that one is, that was watching that review, that throwback kind of like talking about it thing, and I think it was in there that somebody said somebody was attached. I'm gonna probably butcher these words, but this is what I got out of it. Is that one of the people who worked there said Bond is it's kind of like comfort food. There's a formula, it's going to follow the formula, the same actors are there, the same players are there. You can rely on a Bond movie to just sit back, relax, and enjoy it. And I have to agree. That I think that's the thing I like about Bond movies is you just can suspend your disbelief Go off and have fun. You know he's going to go gallivanting. You know he's going to do stuff that no spy could ever do without getting caught in 5 seconds. You know that he's going to have a great time. There's going to be action. There's going to be this. There's going to be that. There's going to be just the set of things. And the other thing about Bond movies is that it's not just an actor will play it consistently over time. All the same people consistently work over a large course of the films. There's a consistency in staff and crew and writers and actors. You can just rely on a dependability. So you kind of know what you're getting into when you watch a Bond movie.
Yeah, I will say with A View to a Kill, I don't think it's Roger Moore's worst movie. And I also, how I feel about it varies each time I watch it. It's kind of strange. Sometimes the things that bother me, like, really bother me. And then other times I'm just like, yep, I'm in here for the weirdness of Walken and Grace Jones and the Duran Duran song.
Do not insult Duran Duran. That is the best theme song of the lot. Tied with the Living Daylights. Tied with the Living Daylights.
I love the Duran Duran song. It might be the best part of the movie, but I think I just learned this from there's a podcast where they make lists, and they did a huge mega draft list of the Bond franchise, and they were talking about Walken. Walken didn't want to do the movie. Of course, they wanted Sting or David Bowie to play the bad guy because that's who they were trying to get. And his agent's like, dude, if you do a Bond movie, then you can do whatever you want for the next 10 years. So he's like, fine, I'll take it. And apparently Walken's approach for the character was the hair. And he was like, are you threatened by my hair, James Bond? Do you like my hair, James Bond? Are you afraid of my hair, James Bond?
Yeah, they had a hard time casting that. They had a really hard time casting Zorin. That was a hard cast. So yeah, that was. But they got somebody, and Walken, of course, is just an amazing, actor. So I really like it, and it's a fun movie, just like Bonds are in general.
Yeah, I think maybe Moore wasn't the right actor, and he certainly felt that way after finding like he didn't like the darker tone of the violence, and
No,
he didn't
yeah,
like that Tanya Roberts was 30 years younger than him, and he was older than her mom. So
yeah.
yeah,
He gave it his all, and he really worked it. He was, but it was clear that by this point he was, not interested in doing these anymore. And I don't think it was one of those things where he's like, I don't care on this set. I don't care at all. No, he's not like that. But you can definitely tell that he was, I know that he realized that's going to be my last film. He wanted to apparently, I've heard he wanted to leave several films earlier than that, like you said. But he went out and he did his thing, and it's once you've made that many Bond movies, you can either do whatever you want or you can just not bother working ever again because you got more money than anybody. So more just got to always be awesome.
yeah, and
Like
I
the
don't
real
think he
famous
ever
Bond.
resented the role or anything like Connery did later. I think like yeah, certainly he would have been glad to have left when he was younger because he definitely is starting to look his age in A View to a Kill. And also, nothing against the late Tanya Roberts, but for everyone that likes to give Denise Richards crap for The World Is Not Enough, I will say Tanya Roberts rivals that style of performance that they want to give Denise Richards flack
Yeah.
for.
No, you can. I mean, they're both. They're it's not a chop on their acting quality. It's just miscast.
Miscast and writing. I don't
There
want
you
to.
go. When you combine those two, it's a deadly combination.
So let's take it back a little bit, and go kind of to the beginning with the Connery era, which I think the reason one is nostalgia, is why he's so beloved too, and two, like they were the trendsetters at that point. And for a long time, and maybe even today, the Bond franchise now feels like they're trying to replicate something that's popular in Hollywood instead of setting the trend. But they were the trendsetters in the 60s. I will say two things about the Connery era. The Cold War 60ness of it is really cool, but the misogyny is, I think, the worst of the Bonds.
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely say so. But I'm, I just, but those are some, yeah. The beauty of life is that we figure out very quickly how to move on, and get better. And that being said, um, Connery, he figured out very quickly he had to make the character funny, and he added a lot more humor to it. He added a lot of just style and panache. He's less jaded than Bond in the book, um, but I think Bond in the book has a lot more heart.
Mm.
Um, and I think if I remember correctly, for a good chunk of the books, the body count is just nowhere near as high as it is in the movies. Um, he but and honestly, we're going there. Craig is about as close as you can get to the book Bond, but Connery's performance, it's kind of hard once you've set that high of a bar. Once you've set that, you're, I mean, yeah, it's just near impossible to change that. I think Craig has done the same thing. It's going to be difficult, for a lot of people to take a new Bond, which of course I'm glad they're going to be starting searching next year for it, because it's a franchise I don't want to see die at all. um, so yeah, but yeah, go ahead.
What I think, well, in my opinion, I think each of these bonds have a certain strength. What I think a reason why everybody, well, I can't say everybody, everyone's not everyone, but why a vast majority of Bond fans will always think of Sean Connery is because he kind of has the full package, right? He's suave, he's debonair, he's good with the one-liners, he's physical. Like he has all the attributes that some of the other Bonds have, some of those, but not all of those. And he kind of checks all the boxes.
Yeah, and I mean, he set that standard, and then there it was. Um, and because he's got all those things, and then you have Lazenby following up, and Lazenby was, we could do hours of talking about everything that occurred that Lazenby does not have a second movie, and I'm not even going to go there because you can go look that up yourself. It is
There's a documentary actually out
there's a
about it that's really
documentary
good.
on it. There are YouTube videos on it. There's a 3-hour introspective, or retrospect. That's the word, retrospective breakdown of On Her Majesty's Secret Service that two guys did. And on top of that, and it's like, just completely skipping that out, I think we lost an amazing absolute opportunity. I think that's the greatest tragedy, in the Bond franchise, or let me represent one of the greatest tragedies that could have befallen a franchise, was losing such a remarkable, you know, uh, opportunity to really see what he could do. I think but at the same time, we still ended up coming out with amazing movies, and regardless, Bond will always be good. Bond's always going to be great, but I think it's a great shame that we didn't get to see more of Lazenby.
Yeah,
Um,
because I think he definitely is the weakest of the actors because, well, he wasn't an actor. He kind of stumbled his way in there and got the job because he actually knocked somebody like the tactics he pulled to get this job would not be he would not be able to do that today.
No, he could probably have pulled it off in
But
the business world somewhere else and gotten the job. There was a level of cojones there that is absolutely spectacular. Um, but in fact, part of the reason he probably couldn't pull that off is because he kind of did it. That probably was enough. But yeah, but he is definitely honestly, people say he's the weakest of the actors. I just don't think we got to have a chance to see him, really do it. We don't really know his full capacity of what he could have done. Um, he clearly had so many chops. He did beat a lot of other people in the role. It's not like they just said you got the job. He did have to audition for it. So he clearly won out. So I think it was one of those things where we just never will know where that went.
yeah, he literally knocked out a guy in auditions for a fight sequence. So
Well, he was the first person to actually have training in how to beat the daylights out of somebody. And you can see it especially in the opening scene. And as much as I will criticize the cinematography and editing of the opening scene, not the cinematography, but the editing of the opening, oh my, yes, because that movie is the most beautifully shot movie of all the Bond movies. It is remarkable. And then you have that opening scene, which is
yeah,
nothing but speed ramps, nothing but fast cuts. It's very difficult to actually know what you're seeing because it's jumping from place to place to place. It's a real hard to follow scene.
yeah, the fighting is choppy in that scene, but I think the other tragedy with On Her Majesty's Secret Service is how long it took for people to be like, "Oh no, this is actually one of the better films in the franchise." And it's
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean,
sad that director Peter Hunt, who was an editor for all the earlier films of the franchise, never really got to make anything quite this impressive again, and I don't think he lived long enough to see the turnaround of the movie where it is now to where it was standing 20, 30 years
yeah.
ago.
I mean, from what I remember, the movie did actually really well overseas and then crashed and burned in America. And because it is a very different Bond story. It is a very, very different Bond story. And it's not um it's got a lot of romance in it because it's about that, and it's remarkable, and it has easily the best Blofeld of the lot, with probably the most clever plan of the lot. It's an absolutely beautifully shot, beautifully done, beautifully told. There's nothing about that movie I dislike except the editing choices at that beginning scene. And also how they got that ski chase scene at that time period is beyond me, because some of those shots going down the ski slope that were not green screened, I'm like, how did you get those shots? I want to
It's
know. Because
breathtaking.
yeah, it's like the avalanche being used, Peace Gloria, everything in that was so well done.
And I would argue it's John Barry's best score of
Oh,
all
hands
the.
down. Yeah, that is absolutely his best score. I love that score. I listen to it a lot. And someone pointed out there are four chords that are used in the three songs of the opening movie, or of the opening credits, and the two songs that happen in the actual opening before the credit. And all of them use the same four chords. So it's the most technical thing that you can spot for his scores, because it just, even though they're all different, they all feed together. It's a really beautifully done score. Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad it finally got its due. And I mean, it's really is a remarkable movie, and you can see its effect on later Bond films, especially this latest one.
Well, yeah, definitely this latest one. I have an inkling this might be Daniel Craig's favorite Bond film.
I get the feeling it probably is. I get the feeling it probably is. It's clearly the director's favorite. It's clear that everyone involved. It's because it really does hold up to the test of time, and it's a very different Bond from what we see anywhere else, and it really is amazing.
Yeah, I didn't think we were gonna quite jump into it. I will say full disclosure, it's my favorite Bond film because of all the things that you've mentioned that separates it from the pack. And I think another smart thing, whether it was Peter Hunt or Albert Broccoli or whoever, I think it was very smart of them because they were working with an inexperienced actor playing the lead in their role that they cast probably one of the most exceptional actresses to be a Bond girl. In my opinion, the best Bond girl. I
Oh
got
yeah,
into an
Diana Rigg hands down is the greatest Bond girl. She's remarkable, and she is so she's very different from a lot of the other Bond girls of the era, where they're all they're hopeless, helpless. No, 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 no. You don't screw with Tessa. You don't screw with Tessa. She is not to be messed with at all. She is a very hardcore, awesome, you know, character. And there were actually several of them that were like that, and people don't give it credit. She's badass as heck.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think they're like, we've got to have, because I don't think any of the Bond women at that point were of that caliber of actor that they cast, but they knew they needed somebody that could hold their own in a scene, especially when you're working with an actor who's less experienced. And also, I mean, yeah, Telly Savalas, another, gravitas actor that
it's kind of yeah. The second anytime Telly Savalas is on screen, it's basically I am in charge. All things revolve around me. He's just one of those. He was one of those actors that could suck the air out of a room, and you just listened. And so it really, yeah, he was such a remarkable choice for Blofeld. It was so good.
so
Um,
I would argue with anyone who hasn't seen it or hasn't seen it in a long time, like, take the George Lazenby out of it because he does a decent job enough, but everything else in that movie is top notch. That it's exceptional. I mean, the co all the rest of the cast is phenomenal. I mean, the technical, the writing, everything is top notch surrounding him.
yeah, I mean it really is amazing. Though I will admit there's a good chunk of the film where they had another actor voicing because he was
Mhm.
playing a different he was undercover. And of course voiceover was just the most common thing at that time. Half the
Well,
villains were dubbed over
I
and some
heard part of that was also because of Lazenby's behavior and some of the crew not caring for him.
I've heard he was a hot shot. Yeah. I think but yeah, I again I that's such a long discussion. And there's so much myth and rumor around it, and I haven't seen the documentary that kind of spells out what actually happened. So anytime you're talking about Bond, anytime there's something unclear, there's always more rumor than fact because everything is I don't know why, but there always is. But yeah, like he yeah, but no, and they voiced over stuff all the time, and I don't think that gave you a real good chance to really see more of what he could do. Um,
But I
but
actually like that part of the movie because it's like the
oh, I love
only
it too.
time I'm like, oh, he's actually being a spy.
Yeah, yeah, it's like it's rare you actually see Bond as a spy, and he's really being a spy in that one, and it's probably the most spy moment of any Bond movie. And it's really is it's really good. Um, so yeah,
And I think that's why I like this one, not because of the themes of it being a little bit different, like it being like, not there's an actual romance between Bond and the Bond girl, and he gets married. So automatically she's the best Bond girl because she's the only one that's been Mrs. Bond. But
but
I
I
like
think
the Bond.
Tessa, it's Tracy. Oh my, I need caffeine. I
It's
am going. If
okay.
you are still watching this, I deeply apologize.
Yes,
Please,
Tracy.
just please do me a favor and put like a giant logo. Misspell name will be corrected at 34 seconds and 45 or 34 minutes and 45 seconds. Like, oh, I hate that. I knew that was going to happen at some point. I'd get confused on something.
It's fine.
Dyslexia
It's
hits
fine.
brain.
But I prefer when Bond is using more of his skills and wits instead of overly a ton of gadgets. So I kind of gravitate towards those kind of Bond films more.
Yeah, definitely. I agree though that let's face it, not having gadgets in movies not as fun.
Not as
Not
fun.
as
And
fun. You know,
I do want to get back to the Connery era briefly. What do you think is the highlight of the Connery era and to you?
to me it's From Russia with Love, but Goldfinger is really hard to knock. I mean, honestly, they're probably tied, but they're tied for different reasons.
For sure.
Um,
I think From Russia
and
with Love, I prefer personally because it's more of what I want and it's just a great Cold War thriller. It probably has the best collection of multiple Bond villains. Red Grant's a Bond villain. He's not a henchman, he's a Bond villain.
and he's honestly probably it's probably one of the best books too. I mean, it follows the book pretty closely.
Well, that's why that
Um,
became the second movie was because JFK loved the book so much. They're like, "All right,
yeah,
let's do that one next."
Doctor No is I think the ninth or 10th or something. You know, I think he did 13 books, and Doctor No is number 10. I think. You
So
know,
I know
after
you're not
that,
a big fan of that one, but I kind of dig it because
yeah,
it's like a police thriller instead of a
yeah.
spy movie. Like it's like a detective story a little bit.
The thing I love about that movie is it follows all the things that are awesome in that book. My problem with it is the villain's plan in the book is so remarkably good. It is absolutely scary. But at the time period, nuclear proliferation, all that was very terrifying to people. So I see why they did it. But to me, I'm like, I think they just, I don't know why. I think they took too much of away with it while ignoring that actual villainous plot that was so much more terrifying if you really think about what the villain in that movie, in the book, could do, what Dr. No was doing in that, where, versus throwing in all this nuclear stuff. Because it's like, yeah, the thing I'm doing requires nuclear power because it's the only thing that power enough of it. And so yeah, it's one of those things. But no, I mean, there's so many great moments in that movie, so I don't knock it entirely. But it definitely, I think it lost a lot of stuff because of that. Just from reading the book, it's rarely that I actually will start to complain, you know, about something, but that's one where I really complained. I really was like, they took what I thought was infinitely more scary, and they added it to they took it in a very different direction.
Yeah,
But
and
it
it's
makes
kind of
sense for the
interesting.
time period why they went to that direction.
That might be why it was also what probably why they did that one first is because it's pretty much in one location for the most part.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's pretty easy to do, and
But
there's so many
it
great moments.
it got the tone right. They Connery nailed it. I mean, when he just says those words at the casino, Bond, James Bond, you're like, all right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Thunderball. I mean, really, if you look at it, it's like from Thunderball all the way to Goldfinger, and From Russia with Love comes right is the third one, right? I always flip Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, and Thunderball together.
It
I
was
don't know why
Doctor
I do that.
No, From Russia with Love, and then Goldfinger, and then Thunderball.
Right. Yeah, I'm always getting Thunderball and Goldfinger flipped. So yeah, and
It's a
and
shame that they didn't keep Jack Lord on as Felix Leiter though, because they were afraid
yeah,
he was too big of an
they
actor to be bigger than they didn't want him to be a bigger name than the Connery. But that's too
yeah, they did a
bad.
lot of yeah, they did a lot of they went through a lot of lighters. That's a role that was rarely kept the same person twice. He even got Columbo at one point. So you know, no, it wasn't Peter Falk. Who did they get? Oh God. Okay, now I'm just getting confused. All right, I'm gonna stop skipping names because I dyslexia is the enemy of podcasts. Uh, um,
So I love
yeah,
From Russia with Love, but yeah, like you said, it's kind of hard to ignore Goldfinger because what it did for the franchise. Like that's
yeah,
where the formula kind of is born, and they basically have been trying to remake this movie over and over again.
yeah, and it actually follows the book pretty closely too, which is something I
It
like.
does, yeah. That's one of the books
Yeah,
I've read. It's not. It is in my top 10, but it's not one of my all-time favorites because there's just some I prefer more. But I can't ignore what it does. There's just a few things in Goldfinger that are a little cringy for me, like the whole basically rape scene with Pussy Galore.
there's a Connery's character that at that time period that anyone thought that was acceptable at that time period just
But I mean, you got a
and
cool villain with a
yeah,
great plan. You
exactly.
got an
Yeah.
awesome henchman. You got that, and that's one thing I do miss from the older Bond movies is this rat-a-tat between Bond and the Bond villain. Like they're just playing
Yeah,
golf.
yeah, I know. It's like that is one of the best scenes ever and like just they're playing golf. And that's it. And then there's a scene in the horse farm. It's like it's just I love the way they do that. Um
And
and
it takes
yeah,
place in my home state of Kentucky, so I gotta like it.
yeah, okay, you gotta do a shout out there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Closest I got for home state of Mississippi is they shoot a lot in casinos, and we have a lot of those, but none have ever been shot there. So we'll just
Well, Live
but
and Let
hey,
Die is kind of near you. It's in
yeah, it's in
Louisiana.
New Orleans. Yeah, it's in New Orleans, Louisiana. Yeah, it's like so yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of yeah, Connor. There's just so many good moments, and then there's so much cringe, and that is really where I want to leave it because it makes me so deeply uncomfortable, and I don't like thinking about that stuff at all for reasons, and we'll leave it at that. That's
For
all I'm gonna
sure.
say. It just makes me very, very, you know, there's a reason I'm all about survivors support. So that we're just leaving it at that. So yes, but we'll we sorry we've taken this very seriously. Anyway, let's talk about Q.
Q, yeah, played by the late Desmond Llewellyn for the whole franchise, pretty much until the Brosnan era. I believe
Yeah,
he's introduced in From Russia with Love, but he's not really called Q till Goldfinger.
yeah, exactly. He's just from Q Branch, and he's got a couple of seconds. Before that, you had the armor, which just appears in Gold and Doctor No.
Right. And I love how involved he gets sometimes in the franchise, especially in License to Kill. I love that relationship with
Oh
Bond and
yeah,
Q.
he's so good. Um, he's so good in that. And honestly, he had uh great back and forth with all of them for the most part. But honestly, some of the best moments of his were with Brosnan. I think honestly, some of the very best moments of his where I think he really shined was with Brosnan.
Yeah, I would agree. And nothing against the comedic legend of John Cleese, but I did not care for his interpretation. I know he started out as R, but then he became Q for Die Another Day.
Yeah, that was a one-time thing though, and it yeah.
But I
But
do love Ben Wisham as
oh gosh,
Q.
he's so good. They could not have gotten a better person for that role.
And that is something I really think is probably the best in the Craig era is the whole MI6 crew. Like
Yeah, and that was
Moneypenny,
some.
Tanner, MQ, like that's probably the strongest MI6 team
Art.
we've had, but they've also given them like more to do than just here's your mission, James Bond.
And that's how it is in the books. They're all very close knit crew. Though Q isn't really part of the books, all that much. But there's like I said, I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly from the books, you basically just have the armor and Q branch. You never have a Q. I could be misremembering that, but I don't recall Q being in the books. But there's definitely a lot of that Tanner is such a huge character, and um,
Which I
M
just
is so,
found out rewatching Goldeneye that I didn't know Tanner had existed in the films before the
oh
Craig
yeah,
era.
yeah.
He's in two of the
Colin Salmon,
Brosnan films.
yeah, Colin Salmon plays him really, really well. And yeah, Tanner was a huge part of the books. It was Bond's best friend, and he also had a very, very close relationship with M. Um, so there's, in fact, one of the things they heavily lean on in the first part of For Your Eyes Only comes a from that relationship between M and M and Bond. Where there's an assassin and all that stuff you're dealing with. That's taken very heavily from one of the short stories.
And
Um,
I believe that's the one Bond film where M isn't around because Bernard Lee was ill
yeah,
and they didn't
yeah,
recast till Octopussy. And that's another thing that they've done in the Craig era is make that Bond and M relationship more than what you see is just
yeah. I
James
mean,
Bond's boss.
exactly. They started it out pretty a little bit better with Brosnan. They kept moving it on, and then, but yeah, M is definitely yeah. I like that they brought that in. That was something from the books that when I read the books, I always thought would be, but and then they brought started bringing it in, and I really love that. You know,
So is it because I think well, it's a different dynamic. It was kind of interesting they kept Judy Dench from the Brosnan era to the because in the Craig era, I feel like it's a little bit of a surrogate mother mentor role.
yeah. I mean, come on, can you replacing Judy Dench would have been a crime. Uh,
But the
you know, uh,
Brosnan era, it's more like they don't really like each other and they don't agree with each other's methods, but they respect each other because of how good they are
yeah,
at their job.
yeah. It's like, and I think you're a misogynistic dinosaur. Like yeah, there's and just getting past that, just talking about the changing of the guard there. Because I do want to talk about Dalton because he's my favorite Bond. But with that 5 year gap, the Cold War ends, and suddenly you're like, I remember when I was a kid because I understood the cold. I probably being a hit, like a lot of people didn't pay attention when I to our age. I don't know how much, but we all remember the Cold War really well. We know it, and it was kind of like, well, Bond's a Cold War guy. What happens when the Russians aren't involved? And Goldeneye expertly handled that question because it was something on everybody's mind. I remember looking at my dad and said, "What are we going to do now that the Cold War's not around?" And he said, "I don't know. We'll wait and see what they do." And that was addressed in the movie because it was on everybody's mind, apparently, to my surprise. And they handled it really well. Um, and they showed that transition quite perfectly.
Yeah,
I really liked it.
I think they did a great job because it had been 6 years. The Berlin Wall comes down. I mean, a lot changed. I mean, we went from the Reagan era to the Clinton era. Like a lot had changed in our
Yeah. Yeah. There's,
society. And
yeah.
Pierce Brosnan finally gets to be Bond because he was supposed to be Bond for the Living Daylights, but then at the
Yeah.
last minute, like when he's
Limited the
out the
contract.
door to go to the press conference, he gets a call on the telephone from NBC saying they renewed his contract for Remington Steele.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I probably would have tried to break that contract if it were me, but
I probably wouldn't have answered the phone. I'd be like, "Well, I'm on my way to tell the world I'm James Bond." So
yeah, I don't know, but that's what happened, and that contract must have been very ironclad. So like there must, but hey, But uh, the yeah, but it ended up getting us Dalton too. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and you you said he's your favorite Bond. So I
hands
have a
down,
question.
hands down.
Is that because most people who are huge fans of the novels say he is the closest to Fleming's interpretation of the character?
Up until Craig, he definitely was. Though surprisingly, Lazenby really does cover a lot of the things, covers the more sensitive, covers a lot of Bond too. He's actually a lot closer than, and he definitely more closer than
Well,
Connery
is that
or
because
Moore.
maybe the film on Her Majesty's Secret Service is pretty close to the book too?
It's exceptionally close. There's very little. There's not a lot of difference, and they got an actor who could carry that role. And so, say what you will about him, he carried on a pretty serious take on the character. But yeah, Bond in the book is very jaded. And if he's not on an adventure, he gets very self destructive. And they only go on their little missions a couple of times a year. Most of the time, they're stuck in an office and he hates it and he's always threatening to resign because he has to be doing something. So it's like if he's not on vacation, they get ample vacation time. He's off on a mission. The rest of the time, he's stuck in an office reviewing files, going, yes, move this up to this guy or move this down or kick it back down to these guys. They can handle it. Just reviewing national security matters and flipping between the other double O's talking. I don't know if you ever meet any of the other double O's, but it's like, yeah, send over to 005 for review. And so
I
he
think
takes,
besides GoldenEye, where we actually get to meet a double O, I think the only other time we see one's an Octopussy. I forget, is he 008 or 009? He gets killed at the beginning of the
yeah. And then we
movie.
also, of course, see a 007 and we also see the new 007
Right, and No Time to
in
Die.
Die. And of course, that's not a spoiler. Everyone is pretty obvious, who she is. But it's like, yeah, Dalton carried over perfectly that jaded, just angry, you know, personality of Bond. And Bond's not always angry, but there's definitely he's so jaded that you can get it out of him, and you can see that. And Dalton captured that aspect perfectly. He was so close to the book Bond, it's scary. And they say he was actually on set reading it, and apparently he had been offered the job, but he felt he was too young
Well, yeah,
for
at
the
the time
role.
of Honor Majesty's Secret Service, he was like 22, 23 years old.
Yeah, he was a little bit younger than Lazenby, and
Yep.
honestly, he could, being who he was, he would have carried that role perfectly. But hats off to him. He just felt he was too young for the role, and he didn't want to. He wanted, and he got his chance, and he did it again. And if it weren't for, I think it was a lawsuit that slowed it down, you could have gotten something out of it. And I would have loved to have at least seen a third time as Dalton, or with Dalton as Bond.
Yeah, I would have definitely loved to have seen more Dalton. I think had he gotten at least another film or two, I think he would have a. I mean, there's a lot of people that go to bat for Dalton in those two films, but
Yeah.
I think he would be more in the pop culture lexicon because I think Timothy Dalton's the best actor out of all these guys.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's the most classically trained, and because he was a theater actor first, if I remember correctly. But
Hmm.
he's remarkable, and if Dalton's in anything, that I'm gonna watch it. And Dalton is just so good as Bond, and he's got two of honestly the strongest movies.
Yeah, I'm
He's
gonna say, and for different reasons. I think The Living Daylights is it's the only Bond film of the 80s that feels like it's in the 80s. I think it's a great Cold War thriller.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I love that and I know part of this was because of the AIDS epidemic going on in the world, but I love that it's a little bit more of a love story between him and the Bond girl. Like, he's not off sleeping with multiple women. It's one
Yeah,
woman.
I mean, yeah, if you look at him throughout that film, he's a lot more sexless in those movies, and that's part of the reason I like it, because there's no, it's just Bond being Bond, and I really like that.
I will
Um,
say the one thing I don't like about the Living Daylights is that the henchman is far more terrifying and impressive as a villain than the actual villains in the movie.
yeah, the villain in the movie is, you know, he's. I'm not sure they're weak, but they're not as probably not as intimidating. But I'm not sure they were written to be intimidating. I
Well, I
feel like
think
there's
Joe
not.
Don Baker was better cast as a CIA
Yeah,
consultant in the Brosnan
definitely.
films.
I wasn't talking about Joe Don Bake, role. I was talking about the main role. But you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
uh, yeah, like without spoiling anything. But yeah, no, I think that, I mean, okay, come on, that fight on the C-130 is
That's
about as
impressive,
cool
which
as
they've ripped
it's.
off. Haven't they ripped
Oh,
that off in the Uncharted
Uncharted 3
games?
stole the daylights out of it, and the new movie's going to steal the daylights out of it. And yeah,
No pun
also,
intended.
no pun intended, but if you're going to go out on a score, that's the score you go out on, because
Yeah,
next
that's
to
another
on
impressive score. That's Barry's last score he did, right?
and for these that's Barry's last score for a Bond movie. He did do a few more after that, if I remember correctly, but he was going to do, I believe he was going to do License to Kill as well, but he was sick at the time, and so they got Michael Kamen to do it. But I think it was Michael Kamen. And
Yeah, big
they
the same guy who did Lethal Weapon and Die Hard
yeah,
and all those
he
80s action
and
movies.
yeah, I think he also did Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which was is still one of those scores you hear it and it gets, and that theme song just gets used everywhere. I think it's, but yeah, anyway, yeah, if you're gonna go out on a score, if this is the last score you're gonna do for a series that you're remembered for, or even if it had just been his last score ever, that's the score you go out on. That was just amazing. And it and Honor Majesty Secret Services are two scores I can just listen to and listen to and listen to. I love them. But yeah, the License to Kill especially is my favorite of that lot, and I like that one
I'm
because
gonna
it's.
argue that Timothy Dalton still has the best final Bond movie of all the Bonds.
Yeah, if
Even
you're
though
gonna
he
go out on Bond, like, yeah, I think that's his best of the final Bond movies. It's just great. Everything about everything about that movie. Light, everything from lighter to Fran Sanchez the villain to every. And I'm not spoiling squat if you've never seen it, because it's abundantly clear who the villain is in the first 5 seconds of the movie. And so first minute I should say. But yeah, it's really, really, really good. And
I concur. I think License to Kill rules. I think more people should check it out. I think it's as strong as any other 80s action movie of the era. I know a lot of Bond fans don't like this because of that. They think it feels like an episode of Miami Vice, which I mean was heavily popular at the time. But I like that they were trying to do something different with the franchise and they were like, let's make this as dark and as violent as we can.
yeah, it was the first Bond movie I think to strike a PG-13 rating, and it
It
was definitely its
was, and
most
we
serious.
you see a guy explode.
Yeah, it is very, very serious. It's a very serious movie. While still being, it's just a hardcore fun action movie, and I think it holds its own easily with the other of the best Bond movies.
Yeah,
Like if
and
you look up.
I like Bond on the edge outside of jurisdiction. He's on a vendetta.
Yeah,
I like,
yeah,
and
and
I can't think of
Bond.
another actor who could have done it as well as Dalton for that
Yeah,
story.
Bond going rogue. Anytime Bond goes rogue, it's good. Anytime you just get to see Bond hit the berserk button, which he's more than capable of doing, it's always a bit shocking. And I think that's the reason why my friend loves Roger Moore the most, is because Roger Moore can go from zero to, or can go from gentleman to berserker barbarian in zero point 0.2 seconds. And when he does lose his cool and he does get angry, it's really effective. And you see that perfectly in For Your Eyes Only. But yeah,
Right.
Dalton is just Dalton's a complete package. He's not as suave, but Bond was not the suave guy in the book. But he has all the other characteristics for the most part, and he is just, yeah. Those are two movies. You know, when I rank Bond movies, I rank, what would I say, because they're all good, and I could go on about cinematic this or that from a technical perspective. In which case, I will flat tell you, Honor Majesty Secret Service is the best there. Boom, we're done. No, I would argue, when I will try to rank a Bond movie, I do it by, if this is on the TV or I want to watch a movie, which one would I just sit down and watch without a question? And that's how I've always tried to rank Bond movies, because I'm so emotionally attached to all of them that it's kind of impossible for me to, in another way, rank these movies. You know, I can't do it on a technical perspective. I can't do it on those things. You know, it's like, I just can't. It's just, Bond's too special to me. Um, but yeah, both of his films are two movies that I could just sit down and watch anytime. They're
I
very, very
agree. I think they're among the best of the best. I think he's 2 for 2. I
I
mean,
think,
I guess
yeah,
Lazenby can't count because he only did one. So I will say Dalton has the most consistent record of all the Bonds because he only did
exactly.
two, and
Yeah,
they're
he had
they're
no
both
bad
strong
movie.
films.
Yeah, exactly. He had no bad movie, and and a lot of people are like, well, Bond going rogue. There's no this, there's no that. He's going after a drug dealer. Have you seen a man ever go that crazy on film? No, you haven't. This guy is a badass the entire way through. I mean, this is the
I mean,
Bond
Tom
of the
Cruise
book,
goes
and it's,
rogue in every Mission Impossible movie, so why can't James Bond go rogue?
yeah, exactly, yeah, exactly, yeah. That's, yeah, um,
I love the
yeah.
Mission
Then,
Impossible franchise, though. I'm not
yeah,
dogging it.
yeah, they're good. I, yeah, like, I think number four is my favorite of the lot out of those. But yeah, getting completely back that, since we're talking about Bond, um, I, I Brosnan has a very weird run, for his inconsistent run in his movies. Um,
Yeah, and I think part of what happened was, of course, Albert Broccoli, who had been the person who ran this franchise, you know, that's the last one he's involved with. All right, he was ill when they started that one, but he's like, we got a new Bond, we got the franchise back. Because that was the thing, talking about Dalton not doing a third one. He almost did Goldeneye. I don't think it was Goldeneye at that point. I don't know what,
yeah,
but he almost came back and did it. But they wanted to sign him for a contract, and he's like, I don't want to do a contract. I will do one more, and that's it. And they're like, well, we want a contract. So they get Brosnan, who was supposed to be Bond in the 80s. And I think after Broccoli dies, you have Michael Wilson, who his stepson, who'd been involved since, I think, Moonraker, and then his daughter
yeah,
Barbara, who had started out in pretty lower jobs, but then had worked herself up to producer. And then
yeah,
I think they weren't sure what tone to go with, because Brosnan's a good Bond, but like they were trying to be Connery and Roger Moore at the same time.
yeah. His Bond is got the suaveness of, is got the suavely nature of, you know, of Moore, with the rough and tumble angle of Connery, and he's kind of a good fusion of the two. And I don't know where, as I understand it, there was more studio at play at that time period, is what I've heard. but I'm not sure. I know with Die Another
What's
Day, there definitely was apparently, um,
right. But it's
but
also the first time, like, a lot of people like to try and, like, poop on the Brosnan era now. They're like, "Oh, GoldenEye was the only good one." But that's the first time the Bond franchise became, like, event blockbuster films. Like,
yeah,
those all
yeah,
4 of those movies made, like, a lot of
mega
money at the
bucks,
box
yeah.
office.
Like GoldenEye is a near perfect Bond movie, and Tomorrow Never Dies is a throwback Bond movie.
Mhm.
To the crazy villain of like a Goldfinger or a war villain. Um,
I will
and
say
then
I will say Tomorrow Never Dies is not a bad movie. It's one of those, like, if you caught it on cable, you'd be like, "Oh, this is fun." I think Michelle Yeoh is too BA, though, to be a Bond girl.
she's definitely really strong and absolutely awesome. And when she was cast, I went, "Oh yeah, she was so cool." But and that honestly, it's got the best car chase of any of the movies.
Mhm.
That it's got the best car chase. I love. There's nothing that whole movie, as ridiculous and as much as it borderlines jumping the shark like any other of the most fantastical of Moore's movies. It's still really good, and the villain is good, and I think it has the best opening of any Bond movie. That opening scene is absolutely bonkers good. Um, eh, and I think it deserves a lot more credit. But then you get to The World Is Not Enough,
Yep, I'm
and that
gonna
is
I'm gonna die on this hill with you. I think we're in agreement. This is actually one of my favorite Bond movies. Like
absolutely,
I think it's a much stronger movie than people give it credit to, and it's unfair that people pick on Denise Richards. It's not her fault. That was just
yeah,
not a well-written character, and
yeah.
I
It
don't
was
think
not.
I don't think that character's needed because everything else in this movie is so good. Like just having a female villain and like
Yeah,
the stuff they do between what's going on with her, what's going on with her and M. I mean, they would do it better in well, actually, as much as I love GoldenEye, could part
let's
of
not
that's
spoil anything for any. You just threw out a huge spoiler. Let's just let's
for a
not
22-year-old movie. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's going to be some kid who's come along who's never seen these movies. They're going to go back. Let's not spoil it. Let's
Okay,
not
I
spoil
won't say
anything for
more. I
anybody.
just say that
Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
more in this movie than people remember, and it's
And
honestly
it,
as good as GoldenEye to
I
me.
think it is. I think it is just as strong as Goldeneye. Yeah, it's got a different thing. Yes, it's got.
We could do without the humor. Like there are some humor moments that make you roll your eyes, and you're like, "Oh my
Yeah, there's
god,
some
what?"
definitely some more over the top humor in there, but it's so that tonally it'll shift occasionally very weirdly, but it's so good. Oh my
Hey,
gosh, it's
it's
just
good
so
enough that
good.
Christopher Nolan ripped off the plot for The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I imagine there was definitely a lot of ripping off of that movie. Now that I think about it, yeah. Um, but no, that movie is spectacular. That is on that list of movies that I will just like. Oh, that's on button the seat. I absolutely love that. Yeah, I love that movie. And I love there's nothing about that movie. You know, I really don't like. I love I love just that I could go on and on about how good that movie is, and also it's probably the only one of the movies that, despite how much I am terrible at karaoke, that's probably the one song I could probably karaoke decently. It's God, the world's not enough. There's nothing about that movie I hate. It's just it's like, yeah, I mean, I kind of can border on some of the cheesiness, but it's so over, or that miscast with Denise Richards, and that's not her fault. Like, it's like, as you said, like, she does not deserve to be bashed the way she was bashed, and it's just so unfair to her that people bash her and then blame her for this movie. No, No, it was a bad part. You know, it was miscasting on it because she was put in a terrible part. And she's not. It's like it's just it was a, but yeah, she's still fun to watch. And I really like yeah, I will defend that movie left, right, and center. Um,
I will say there are plot elements in both this movie and Goldeneye that they do in Skyfall much, much better,
yeah,
though.
yes, yes. But Skyfall is an exception to every rule, and we'll get to that in a second. I know, but and then you get to Die Another Day, and I don't think
Ugh.
it and
This
Diamonds Are
is this is
Forever.
this and Diamonds Are Forever are the two Bond films that I'm just like, no, these are bad.
I can see why they didn't go use the villains in Diamonds Are Forever in the original, because it's Bond versus the American mob. Um, but that's a really good book. That's a
That
really
that
good book.
sounds way more interesting to me.
You know
So
what? In hindsight, it absolutely was.
so I
Yeah,
think there's a couple of problems with Diamonds Are Forever. And one, that's the one Connery I guess I didn't watch when I was younger, so I didn't have any nostalgia for that one. And it's the film that follows on Her Majesty's Secret Service, right? And
yeah,
I love
yeah.
that
Because they,
movie. And so this is like, what is this? Because it starts out like, oh, Bond's on the revenge path to get Blofeld, even though that's actually You Only Live Twice in the books, which, despite all its racist problems, I have fun with You Only Live Twice because it's got ninjas and a volcano lair.
yeah, that's a. I'm so
But
glad that
Diamonds Are Forever, Connery could care less that he's even in this thing. He did it for the money. You can clearly tell he's wearing a wig. He did not care about getting into shape. I don't know what Charles Gray is doing as Blofeld. It's weird. Um, Jimmy
Hey,
Dean's in
Charles
the
Gray is fun.
movie.
Charles Gray is still fun. I loved,
I
Charles
mean,
Gray is still fun. Yeah, it's like there's some
he's
good
fun.
moments
I
in that
just don't
movie.
like his take on Blofeld. And then we got
Yeah,
Jimmy Dean as Howard Hughes type, I guess.
yeah, yeah. Willard White, I
A-
think, is the name of the.
And then Tiffany Case starts out as a cool Bond girl, and then they just kind of ruin her character once
They
they get to
didn't know what to
Vegas.
do with. Yeah, they didn't know what to do with Tiffany Case at all. Um, I, yeah,
And honestly,
I,
everyone talks about how ridiculous the Moore era is, which it was, but they started to get ridiculous in the Connery era. Like, even though
yeah. I mean,
Thunderball is a more serious movie, like they tried to up the ante every time after Goldfinger. They're like, well, how can we make it more? And that was Thunderball, which I think is still the highest grossing Bond movie of all time with inflation. And then You Only
probably,
Live
yeah,
Twice is even bigger with a volcano lair. And then
yeah.
like
Yeah, I mean, you only live twice. There's a reason Roald Dahl basically just threw out the like Bond and Bond Japan. Okay, Blofeld, Bond Japan, Blofeld. Three elements. I think they kept Tiger Tanaka. Yeah, they had in Tiger Tanaka. Four elements. That's it. Just four elements, and everything else gets thrown out. I don't think Kissy Suzuki is in it in the book either, but I don't remember.
so in the
But
book
basically,
they
like,
don't try to make Bond look like a Japanese person.
uh, I don't recall, mainly because by a certain point in that book, I finished it because I had bought it. I I don't want to trash anything, but that is a truly, absolutely abysmal book. It
I've
just does
heard
not
that.
work. It does not work. It is a misfire on every single term. It is easily, we talk about problematic things. Yeah, that, yeah,
I've
Yeah,
heard that
it's
about Live
bad.
and Let Die, which the movie also is
Yeah,
very problematic, though I find that film fun.
yeah, Live and Let Die is fun. But yeah, it's kind of like, how do we do an exploitation movie without doing an exploitation movie while also trying? Yeah, it happens.
Well, I heard in the
But yeah,
book Solitaire is actually a woman of color, but the studio wouldn't let them cast the main Bond girl as an African American, so they switched the
yeah,
character
I don't
to.
recall actually. I don't recall. All I know is Mr. Big in the book is an absolute, you know, very different from Yaphet Kotto's Mr. Big. And honestly, Yaphet Kotto is so amazing. He was always good in anything.
Yeah, he was
But
a great
he's a
actor, and I mean, yeah,
much different
despite.
villain.
And I heard the ridiculous sheriff character that they decided to put in two of the more movies. They
Is not.
added that character because of the Louisiana government giving them so much flack about where they could film and not film.
Yeah, yeah, the I will say, you know, uh yeah, there's yeah, but I'll yeah, the Live and Let Die is one of those books that they use all sorts of parts from Live and Let Die. Live and Let Die, the book. They just take parts from it in so many other movies. For Your Eyes Only takes a major part. That big boat scene in Live and Let Die, and towards the end of the movie, or For Your Eyes Only towards the end of the movie with the villain. That's straight out of the book, out of Live and Let Die. Again, the boat scene, and the aquarium stuff is from Live and Let Die. Uh, and License to Kill, what happens to Lighter is
Yeah,
from
that's what
Live
I
and
heard
Let
that
Die.
happens in Live and Let Die, which
Um,
is the same actor. That besides
yeah,
Jeffrey Wright, that's the only actor that's played Felix Leiter more than once.
yeah. What is the name of the actor? Uh,
I don't know his name. I think it's David something.
yeah, but he was a big actor at the time. He wasn't Columbo, was he? Was he Columbo?
No, but I
No,
guess he kind of has. That's Peter Falk, but I guess he does
Peter
kind of
Falk.
have like
Yeah,
Columbo features.
yeah. I think that's why I got it confused. Because you're right. It's he was in something big at the time. I don't remember who at what. He was in a lot of movies, but yeah. So they borrowed that. So they borrowed a lot, and I'm pretty sure they even borrowed stuff in some of the movies afterwards. But those are the three I remember.
But I
And
mean, that movie was successful and it proved that the franchise could survive without Sean Connery. Though I don't think they really got Roger Moore really fit into the role till The Spy Who Loved Me. I think that's
yeah,
really when
I
it.
I think he had to come into his own in that. And yeah, um, I yeah, I definitely would say that despite all the really bad stuff, um, you know, what the thing I love, if we're gonna move on to the era, is how much they've learned to move away from that, and they're learning to move away from it. They've
Okay,
really tried
so
to move away.
I'm going to say Craig is my favorite Bond, and I'll say why. One, I think he's made Bond a human. He's not just a caricature of the ultimate male fantasy
Yeah,
anymore.
that's definitely true. Yeah, that I love.
I think
And the
they
thing,
are commentating even more so about that than they did in the Dalton era of like the misogyny and Bond's viewpoints of the world and what he thinks of women and all these things. I think they're putting it into question and trying to modernize the character and make him more human.
yeah, and they do such a great job over those four films. You see that it's been a real clear evolution as time has changed. They've changed the character too, and it's really interesting, and they will continue to change, and they'll continue to grow. The great thing about Bond is a franchise that can consistently grow and meet the needs of the time. um and
And and he's the only Bond I'd be like, if not that I want to fight anyone or would meet anyone in a fight, but like if Daniel Craig was coming to fight me, I'd be like, no, sir, please don't hit me.
yeah, yeah, I absolutely no.
Cause I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah, he could beat me up like
he
for
could beat me
real.
up.
I
It's
mean,
like
Dalton wouldn't even fight me. He would just shoot me.
yeah, Dalton would just shoot you. I don't think Connery would waste his time.
He
Moore
would just
wouldn't. You'd have to do something really. Yeah, Moore wouldn't care either.
you'd have
Lazenby,
to offend more because he's
yeah,
such a gentleman.
and then Lazenby would actually be able to beat the ever living crap out of you because he was a black belt in multiple forms of martial arts, and people don't realize that. I believe it was like jujitsu, I think is what it was, but no, yeah, he would
Hmm.
absolutely beat the daylights out of you.
For
Yeah,
sure.
so yeah, Moore is Craig.
He's the most
We've seen,
physical.
yeah, and I think we've seen the biggest evolution of the character, and they've leaned a lot into the books while leaving the worst parts out and really grabbing a lot of the best parts. And I think that, you know, that's the direction we can keep seeing this series grow into and,
Wait, you talked
lose all those
about
problematic aspects.
was what was the Bond film you said was your favorite opening? Was it
Uh, Tomorrow Never Die is my favorite opening.
okay? That's right. Tomorrow Never Dies. Casino Royale is my favorite Bond opening.
That's definitely a good one. Skyfall is really good too.
Oh, Skyfall's
Um,
amazing, but what
yeah,
I just love the intimacy. And I love that they went back to the first book because they're like, we've never had the rights to this one. I guess because of the TV movie and then the Peter Sellers movie. I'm
yeah.
not
I don't know why it took so long for them to get the rights to Casino Royale, but the fact that they were able to get it, they did such a remarkable job, and that is such an amazing movie. That was
yeah, and I think Vesper Lynn, Eva Green, is the
oh
only other Bond girl, in my opinion, that is of a caliber as Diana Rigg.
yeah, yeah. I think that they did a really good um they did a I really enjoyed Ava Green. Well, Ava Green's good in anything she does. She's just phenomenal. Um, but I will say I actually really love Leia Sado. They didn't use her enough in Spectre, but she's really good. And
Yeah, they do what so yeah, for No Time to Die, this is definitely the one where we won't say any spoilers
no,
because
no,
it's currently out. But I will say
yeah,
that they do a lot to kind of course correct what didn't work in Spectre. So here's the thing I find infuriating about Spectre because I did watch all the Craig films right before No Time to Die came out. And I hadn't rewatched Spectre since it came out because there was so much about that movie that infuriated me. And I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. And then we get to the third act and I'm like, oh, now I know why I don't like this movie. And like, that bothers me more than Moonraker because, like, I've always said, like, why Moonraker is not the worst Bond movie for me is I'm like, well, the first 45 minutes of Moonraker is solid, and then it just gets ridiculous and ridiculous and ridiculous and ridiculous, which some people love that about it. But I'm like,
I
Spectre
have
is
a
a
really soft
solid
spot
Bond
for it.
movie
Yeah,
up until they get to Blofeld's lair.
yeah. Spectre was one of those movies where my main problem with Spectre, because there is no such thing as a bad Bond movie, in my opinion. I don't think there's really such a thing as a bad Bond movie.
I
Um,
think Die Another Day comes close, though.
Die Another Day probably like clearly it came close because they did a course correction.
And
But
I'll give Barbara Broccoli that because Die
oh
Another Day,
yeah,
despite everybody pooping on it now and saying it's horrible, which it is, but that made a ton of money. It was
yeah,
popular.
and fought like she fought like, no tomorrow to bring the series back to where it needed to go, because that was
Yeah,
a
she
direction
saw
that
that
was
as
just
like
absolutely.
we can't keep doing movies like this. We've got to change. We have got to make this more relatable. We have got to
Yeah,
get higher caliber directors and writers and actors. Though I feel bad what they did to Pierce Brosnan, but
Brosnan just he just he got such a bad. That's not the movie anyone wants to go out on. And because Brosnan's such a great actor and he was such a great Bond. And but there's lots of part of that movie I like. The big problem with that movie is there's too much of everything. There's just
there's too
too
much of
much.
everything. The villain is
It's
ridiculous. The villain's
it's
plan is ridiculous.
yeah. But there's at the same
I
time
love
though.
Rosamund Pike in it, which I think is her
Oh, she's
first
so
film role.
good. She's so
She's probably
good.
the
I
best
mean,
part of the movie, in my opinion.
yeah. Honestly, the sword fight between Gustav Graves and Brosnan's actually really good. I was like, that's a really well shot scene. There's a lot of stuff about it, and honestly, people barf on the invisible car. I happen to really like the invisible car. I happen to really like that car chase. I really do.
Do you
I
like the
happen to really
Ice
like.
Hotel too?
Yeah, okay. The ice hotel was over the top, but the whole fight scene in the ice hotel involving the cars was really good. And then I really like that henchman. I think he's awesome. And but yeah, so that movie is probably the one movie I wouldn't watch it, on a regular basis compared to the others. It's my least favorite. But again, Bond is Bond, and there's going to be somebody, especially a younger kid, who's probably going to really like it, and that will get them interested
That's
in
true.
Bond later. So I don't believe we should knock this movie down. I don't think we should knock any of the movies down for being too silly or too stupid or too, like for being too ridiculous. I'm
Well,
like,
I think
let
that's
people
where we
enjoy what
come
they love.
into what people prefer. Like some people like that aspect of the franchise and like they want it to be more of that Roger Moore
Yeah.
era.
Some people want the Roger Moore era, and some people want, the Connery era, and some people want the Dalton era, and some people who pretty much Craig is the only Bond they've ever known. I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be really hard to top Craig. I
It is,
honestly,
especially because they've made it so cinematic. They've made these
yeah,
movies connect to one another.
yeah, and I think that they will probably not do that in the next run around. I imagine they probably won't go arcish, the way they did. And the No Time to Die, if you haven't seen it, is it finishes the arc and it goes out strong, and it was the perfect place. And it's going to be really great to see where they take the series now.
Yeah, Daniel
And
Craig got something no other Bond has ever gotten. And I think part of that was because he's pretty. There's a great little interview they did in prep before this movie with him, Michael Wilson, and Barbara Broccoli, and he is pretty open about what doesn't work with Quantum of Solace and Spectre. Now he's not as critical on Spectre, which I argue is the weakest of the Craig films. I think Quantum of Solace is why clearly, yeah, it
yeah,
was finished during a middle of a strike, and maybe Mark Forster wasn't the best choice for an action film. I think if you watch it right after Casino Royale, it's fine. It's not
I mean, it's
great.
Bond going rogue, which I love. I mean,
I mean, yeah, the villain kind of has Roman Polanski energy, and it's not
yeah.
that interesting. But I like the whole opera sequence where he infiltrates the quantum meeting,
Oh, that's
and
and that score, not at the opera, is one of the best Bond scores, in my opinion.
I like that he does not sleep with the Bond girl because he
Oh,
knows
I love
like
that.
that's not. Yeah, you have some stuff going on, and I'm not going to.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's what I recall about Diamonds Are Forever is he doesn't do that with Tiffany Chase in that either. So
I
it's
can't
like
remember.
there's
It's been so long since I've seen
it's
that
been so
one.
long. Well, no, the book, the book.
Oh, the book. I was gonna say.
Um,
I'm pretty sure in the
yeah,
movie
pretty
they.
sure. Yeah, I'm pretty Connery. Yeah, Connery's Bond. Yeah, but no, yeah, in the book, if I recall, that's how it is. And yeah, and there's a lot of yeah, um I really like a lot of stuff that they they did in Quantum. I think the thing about Quantum is that people forget it exists because it's I don't know what it is about that movie because it's not a bad movie, not in the least.
No.
It just it's a great movie. I mean, it's a very it's a good movie. I think it was just so unexpectedly different in tone and shift and the way the story played out that they had to course correct. It ran its part. They did do some connection to it in it. They were able to keep it there. Very very little connection. That was all that was needed. Then they go to Skyfall.
Mm.
And one of the things I'll say that I didn't get to say about Casino Royale is I saw that as a double feature with Borat for no, not double. Borat was with The Departed. I saw Die Another Day. I saw what or was it? I'm pretty sure I saw back to back. I saw some movie back to back with because I did two back to backs in college, like that. But I saw that movie for my birthday while I was in college because it came out in November. Casino Royale, and watching Casino Royale took me back to sitting in my father's lap watching For Your Eyes Only, and it took me back to the best parts of Bond. This was Bond back at the roots, back at where Bond does best. And I cried in the theater because it was so good to see Bond back. Like at a certain point, I started crying because I just had such happy memories of watching Bond as a kid. And yeah, Craig, really honestly, look, and this is going to be a lot of people say heresy, and this goes back to what Bond do you like the most? Every one of them is good. Every one of them can be your favorite. Every one of them, and saying one is better than the other, or one is this, or one is that, it's like saying what's your favorite Bond movie. These are movies that are about having fun and loving them and enjoying them. And honestly, if you think a movie that some person thinks sucks is a great movie, or you think this actor or whatever you think it's sucks, enjoy it, like it. You know, Connery is not my favorite Bond, but Connery is so amazing. Um, and if I had to say who's the best Bond, you know, this is silly. It's a tie for me. It is a tie between Lazary, Dalton, and Craig. I mean, after this movie, I have to. Craig was always high on there, but after this movie, Craig is going to be tied because all three of them were just so good in these roles. And Craig had a really good, strong, consistent arc. And even when they had a weakness, they were able to take something from it, bring something into it, and keep it in a consistent thing. And that's something that they had never done in the movies before. And myself, I want them to go back to standalone films myself. I would just prefer they do that. But
I I
this
I
is
agree with you.
but this was really well done and it tied everything together and it was a good way and it was always clear that with Craig being his age they were going to do some sort of reboot afterwards and they will do a reboot and but it's a really great movie. I watched it for a second time the other night with my dad um and first time I saw it I could tell I liked it but I couldn't I literally I was sitting directly under a subwoofer, which is a
Mm.
terrible place to be watching a movie. So I couldn't understand half the dialogue. So I watched it again um, at home, because now it's out on demand if you want to see it. And um, yeah, I loved it. I loved it. I had it's a lot stronger. You know, and
Maybe I need
yeah,
to watch it again. I enjoyed it. I liked a lot of things. I just felt like they put a lot in there, and I know why they put a lot in there. I just feel like maybe a lot of it wasn't needed, but I think the best thing it does is it gives Craig a way to go out and a definitive take on the character in the franchise. I think it course corrects all the things that didn't work in Spectre to make it flow better.
yeah. I
So
mean, my big problem with Spectre is the cinematography is just too dark. I can't see what's going on. Um, and it wasn't as exciting or fun as as Skyfall was. But Skyfall was a gem, and that's
yeah,
certainly what comes along. And if you can't replicate it for a while, that's fine, because certain films are like that. It's up there with Goldfinger and For Your Eyes Only and On Her Majesty's Secret Service and the Dalton films and From Russia with Love and all those. It's just in that the best of the best Bond movies.
I think Casino Royale is too. I think
Casino
he did
Royale is
two.
too, but Skyfall definitely takes the cake out of all those, in my opinion.
I slightly prefer Casino Royale just because it's more intimate and it's more espionage heavy. But I understand why some people might like Skyfall more because it's more of what you want in a Bond movie.
Well, eh, yeah, you can definitely argue that Casino Royale is a masterpiece. It is, it really is remarkable. And watching watching um Skyfall, I think I like Skyfall more because I got to see Bond really stripped down.
I mean, yeah.
Really, yeah, it's Bond at his weakest, but also his strongest. And I think that's what separates it from Casino Royale. Casino
Well, yeah,
Royale,
because in Casino Royale, it's kind of like he's got to get be taken down a notch because he's more cocky and full of
yeah, I mean,
himself. And at
and you can see,
Skyfall, he's not just at his physical weakness, he's also at his emotional weakness.
yeah, exactly. And you're seeing the thing that's so great about Craig's films is, and it's not just because these are what are currently going on, and 15 years from now, we'll have more Bond films and we will retrospect and change everything up. And but
And
just
we'll
from
talk about
strength,
what didn't age well in those in the Craig movie.
and yeah, exactly. We'll all talk about what aged well, what didn't age well, what this, what that. We'll go on and on. And I'll say this much: a lot more is going to age better with these than some of the others.
So
Um,
there's
but
two things Craig says that I love about what he did with this character. So a big thing in Casino Royale is the scene between him and Vesper in the shower after she has helped Bond kill those two assassins that were there to get Lashif, that's who Mads Mikkelsen plays. Yeah.
yeah, Lashif, yeah,
In the script, they had Vesper and Bond like in their underwear. And Craig is like, why would they be in their underwear? Why would she be in her underwear? She's in shock. She just helped murder someone. She is not going to
yeah,
take her clothes off. He said we should be
yeah,
fully dressed in this scene.
yeah. Um, and that was a really emotional gut punch. And I think that's what makes that movie so good is there's so much emotion, and also the fact you managed to make a poker game the single most action-packed, terrifyingly tense.
Right? Who
They
knew
were like,
playing
poker
poker
could
was
not
so suspenseful? Of course,
poker
this
should
is at
not
the
make you at poker shouldn't put you at your edge of your seat. It does. It's so good. I- they did such an amazing job, and if Campbell comes back to direct the next one, it'll be good too, because that's what Campbell apparently is great at
He
doing.
comes and revitalizes the franchise. He's done it twice. He said he'd be open to doing another one if they
Hey,
wanted him.
if they want to bring Campbell back, no one is going to complain at all. Period. But yeah, and I think that's the thing, is that you see an emotional bond there. But I think the reason Skyfall, like I said, there is, we clearly see, because of the amount of time between these movies, Bond goes from 38 years old to 53,
Hmm.
and he's beaten up, he's gruff, he's just he's had the daylights beat at him, because this is a rough job,
And
and you can
correct me
see.
if I'm wrong here, not to interrupt your thought, but I think this is the only era in which they like acknowledge Bond aging. Of course, Craig has played Bond the longest out of any actor now. It was
Yeah,
Roger Moore. But this is like the only time they've like really like played into him being older.
yeah, I think so. I mean, in the canon series, absolutely, yeah. And I think that was to the benefit of the franchise. And I think that Craig is, yeah, I mean, Craig is remarkable, and Craig made this character his own. And I remember everyone, like, I remember, because I had just watched him in Layer Cake, and
Mhm.
Munich had come out shortly thereafter. I think Munich came out either
It
right
came out
before.
roughly a year before Casino Royale.
Yeah, so it came out after the casting announcement then. But I had just
Mhm.
watched Layer Cake, and when they announced who Bond was going to be, and they announced it was Craig, I had just seen Layer Cake, and went, frick, he's gonna be amazing. And everyone was going, oh, he's too short, he's James Blonde, he's this, he's that. There were rumors that he'd had his teeth kicked in, because people were just saying all this trash talk, 2006 internet era, because it's been bad. It's been bad the entire existence of the internet. And then everyone shuts up, as just as I knew they would, when they actually saw him as Bond, and everyone had to eat their own words. Every hater had to eat their
What's
own words, and I
What's
loved it.
funny is what I learned from that interview they did was, yeah, everyone was so upset when he was cast because he's under 6 feet. He's got blonde hair. And they released a press release of filming of the movie, and it's the scene where they kind of, which is kind of cool because they kind of play on the whole Ursula Anders scene, but this time it's Bond coming out of the water. So it's
Yeah,
Daniel Craig in that's those short trunks, and everyone's like, "Oh,
yeah,
okay, you can be James Bond."
yeah. It's like he's one of the first Bonds to actually be fully ripped. And I love that his Bond combines the emotional weaknesses. He's very human. It combines the jadedness. It combines the, it combines all of the best aspects of Bond in one go. He's the complete package. And I think that's the reason why, he's so strong. And I'm never gonna, again, and this is not a bash on Connery or Moore, because as I've said, every Bond actor has been good. They've never miscast that role. And it's
No, and
just a
it's kind
matter
of
of can they get the.
interesting. Yeah, it's different interpretations. And I think it's interesting that 3 of the 6 actors they had tried to cast before they ended up being Bond.
Yeah, and so this actually puts Henry Cavill at good odds. You know, this puts Henry Cavill at
Mhm.
very good odds now, if history is precedent. So because I mean, he had to have impressed the daylights out of him if it was between him and Craig. So
I would argue that Cavill's already kind of had a go. I wouldn't mind seeing Cavill as Bond, but he did get to do The Man from Uncle, which he did really well
yeah,
in.
and he's in Mission Impossible as well, and so if he
Oh, he's
doesn't get
so
to.
good in Mission
Yeah,
Impossible.
yeah. It's like, if you get, I've heard, it's one of those. I just, it's been nonstop busy for so long with me. I just have not gotten a chance to watch them, even though they're
What?
really on my list. I've like, in
Uh,
probably the past 3 years, I've probably seen more movie watching them with you than I have any other time. Like it's been terrible for
Well,
movie
I guess
wise
I'm
in
gonna have to
terms of
do a Mission
watching.
Impossible series so you can
You're
see
gonna have to, so I can watch them. Yeah, yeah. You're gonna have to watch. You
what
know.
Christopher McQuarrie has done with that
Oh
franchise.
yeah, from the moment that the first one he did is my favorite out of the lot. It's so good. I'm like, how can you possibly top that? Apparently he does. Apparently he manages to top that one. So if he topped that, I'm down to see it. But yeah, I mean, I think Henry Cavill's probably got a good chance then. He's right around the right age. I'd like to see Daniel. I'm gonna butcher his name. Please
Kaluuya.
forgive me. Kaluuya. Yeah. I'm. Yeah. I think that's. Yeah. I think he'd be
Actually,
great.
I didn't even think of him until you said that to me a while back, and I was like, you know
Yeah.
what? He probably would be good.
He'd been listed in some of the people's names, and I was like, yeah, he'd be really good.
And I would
And
like to
then
see a different, like, I would like to see an actor of color, whether it's Daniel Kaluuya or Henry Golding or, uh,
John Renee Page is apparently really good. I've not watched Bridgerton. I can't tell you. But yeah,
me
I
either.
mean, if it had been 7 years ago, Idris Elba, but Idris Elba's made it very clear he's never going to play Bond, and everyone just needs to drop that. It's not going to happen. It's just I don't know what would it would take for him to be in that
He would
movie,
be
and that's a
such a
little
great
one-off.
Bond villain, though.
Oh yeah. If you wanted to make him a Bond villain, yeah. I mean, talking about where you could go, you know, there's so many directions they can go since they're going to be rebooting anyway. Um, let's see. It's you could go, you could continue in the time period we're in now, be perfectly fine. You could do shoot back to the '60s the way they're doing in the Bond books now, um,
I would
because there's
love if
some
they
really
did
good
like
books.
a period style James Bond movie, because that is the
Yeah,
thing that I love about that Connery era is like it works for that
I think
genre.
yeah, I think you could go back. I think it would be a perfectly fine thing to do. I
I
think
have
that he's
another question, and it's something that has become part of the Craig era. Do you think we're never going to get just a director for hire anymore for these movies? Do you think they're always going to get some sort of, maybe not an auteur or high profile, but at least a well known director?
you never know. I have no way of knowing that. They hire the person they think is best for the job, and that's the end of it. I think
I
that's the
know, but
thing
I
they can
mean,
rely on those.
for like the
I,
first 40 years of the franchise, it's basically like Peter Hunt was an editor before. Uh, all these guys were, and John Glenn, who directed all the ones in the 80s, he worked and did different things for the franchise before he became a director. Like they
yeah,
were just directors. That they weren't
I would
Sam
love to.
Mendes, Cary Fukunawa, Danny Boyle, who almost made No Time to Die.
Yeah, I think that I would love to see that kind of return. I mean, maybe there is some editor or second unit director or somebody out there they could hire. They've certainly done screenwriters before. Phoebe Waller Bridge would be a great choice. I think she could easily jump into the role. Um, and you could clearly see where I'm quite positive that you could tell where her points of adding into that movie were.
Oh,
I
for
think she'd
sure.
be
There's
great.
definitely
Yeah,
several jokes that I'm like, oh, that was
that
her.
that had to be her. And even if there weren't, her hand was all over that script. I mean, they got a really good writing team together to make that movie work. And I think that I think she would be a great choice. If you were to go, but I think I would like to see someone who's worked on the franchise go back and be someone that hires in, because I think one of the great strengths of the Bond movies were that you had these people build up their time in the series and knew the series and could go in and do it. I would love to see the return of that. Of course, then again, I'm one of those people who love to see the return of editors into being directors, because some of the greatest directors ever started out as editors, and they understand structure really well, and I would
Yeah,
love to see the return to that.
didn't
But
didn't Robert Wise used to to be an editor?
Yeah, yeah, I believe he was.
The guy who did,
You
yeah,
talking about the guy who did Citizen Kane?
and even yeah, he edited Citizen Kane,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
went on to
exactly.
direct West Side Story and The Sound of Music and The Day the Earth Stood Still and Star
And
Trek: The
7 million
Motion
other things.
Picture.
Yeah, 17 million other things. He was remarkable. Yeah, I mean, I would
And
love
I
to see that
believe
kind of thing.
Stuart Baird directed a few things, even though he's kind of gone back to just being an editor again.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. But I'd love to see somebody who's worked on the franchise just get a job. I mean, honestly, I'd love to see Dave Arnold return to do the score. He did some of my favorite scores out of the lot. Um,
Hmm.
but I think that it was very interesting to see where the franchise could go. Um, and we'll wait and see. They're going to start hunting next year. They clearly want to get this stuff out as fast as possible. They clearly have a good direction to go in, and I think they're going to do really well. And I mean, they clearly have a lot of free. I'm pretty sure they have a lot of free hand to do whatever they want at Amazon, and they've been guaranteed theatrical releases. So we'll see where it goes. It's
I
very exciting to see
mean,
what comes next.
the Bercolis and Wilson have made it evidently clear, and I guess they will be able to, even though it'll be interesting with Amazon and like owning the rights now. But they made it clear that he's Bond will stay theatrical as long as there's a theater.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. And they, they have all the reason I think those movies have always done so well is because the team behind it has just knows the franchise. It's their franchise. It's their thing, and they keep it strong. And they don't let people who they don't let other they know what it takes to keep the strong the series strong, and that fact I think is what makes these so good is that we've had one family pretty much run this, and they know it, and they respect the material, and they're not out for fast grab of cash or anything like that. They just they love the project and they maintain it, and the other thing is they're willing to change as they need to. They don't stagnate, and I really like that.
Yeah, I just hope that the series continues to grow and mature and
Well, it has to. There's
keeps
no
what
way to.
has kept it going all this 6 decades, you know?
Yeah, I mean, this is a series that has outlived just about everything else, and the reason is because Bond is good in any situation, and Bond changes with the times, and Bond has continued to change with the times, and it's fun to watch that. It's fun to watch something good like that, a strong character, just be able to be changed and be translatable and be useful the way you often see like Batman or Sherlock Holmes or any of these timeless characters. They can be translated for the time they need to be in and talk about and handle the things of that time period. And we are clearly seeing that now, and they clearly
Yeah.
know where to go. And I'm really excited to see what they do.
So before we wrap it up, I have a couple of questions. Uh, so we're not going to focus on anything bad. I just want to know. I think you've gone into great detail of why you love the franchise. Uh, so is your favorite Bond film? Is it either On Her Majesty's Secret Service or For Your Eyes Only?
I have debated this one so much, and I don't care what anyone says. Ties are perfectly fine. They're a tie. They're a tie,
Okay.
and it's mostly because Honor Majesty's Secret Service is by far a stronger film by most standards. Um, from a technical standpoint, it's easily stronger. But for fun value, Honor for Your Eyes Only is great. It's fun. I enjoy it. It has a fantastic villain. It's got a great storyline. It's the actors in
I
it are
would
really good.
I would argue Topol might be the best Bond sidekick, or right under the guy from Russia with Love.
Yeah, yeah. Topol was absolutely amazing in that. Leopold Locke is such a great Bond villain. They are, there's a lot of, there's a lot of stuff that, in that movie that's so hard to beat. Um, and I think that, it's just a good movie. It's just solid. And, but On Her Majesty's Secret Service, on the other hand, is just a masterpiece. So, and it's kind of the complete package as well, but it's also a very different Bond film. And then, if you had to do it, I'd probably throw License to Kill, uh, you know, in there as well at number three, I guess. But it's like again, it basically this is an ever shifting sort of thing. And I finally gave up trying to name my favorites and not my favorites because they just constantly shift. Bond is Bond, and Bond is fun. you know.
I think we've probably already answered this, but what do you think is the most underrated Bond movie?
Underrated. Probably On Her Majesty's Secret Service is just still it's starting to get its thing. But if you ask my dad what he thinks of On His Majesty's Secret Service, he despises it with every ounce of his being. He hates that movie. It drives him nuts. And I think because Connery was such an important part of his childhood, to suddenly have this thin, skinny guy who's sitting in a hotel, probably drove him nuts. He just think a lot of people at his time period couldn't stand Lazenby. It's because Connery was their guy and Lazenby was just too much of a But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of underrated. I think A View to a Kill, or not View to a Kill. View to Kill's underrated. But I think World Is Not Enough is
It is
also
the weirdest Bond movie.
underrated.
I'll give it
It is the
that.
weirdest Bond movie. It's the weirdest, yeah. World Is Not Enough is definitely on there for underrated. Tomorrow Never Dies on there for
I would
underrated.
agree.
You know, I think I think
I would throw
what
the
is it?
two Daltons in there too as underrated.
Yeah, they're both underrated. I think just that time period between more, those three films before Goldeneye. I think they're all very underrated because the world was in transition, the series was in transition. Um, I think that led to people kind of either being turned off or just forgetting about them. You had such a large that 6 year gap, which had never happened in the Bond franchise before. I think a lot of people probably thought the series was dead, and then Goldeneye just out of the blue pops up. You know, I remember begging my parents because they had a thing about me not watching PG-13 movies, so I threw a 10-year-old kid fit to get him to let me rent License to Kill, and I loved every moment of it. you know, it's like it's Bond. You've let me watch Bond all the time, and they finally let me did it. And honestly, you know, there's the man with the golden guns covered in has nudity all over the place. Come on, it's like this is the worst. Yeah, So yeah, it's one of those things where yeah, I mean it's you know, uh, that's just a great movie, and I still they all have PG-13 ratings now, which is just the new PG for some reason, which I still can't understand. But I though admittedly, there's a lot of movies where I'm like, ratings are one of those things where it's about parental guidance, and so that's different. But no, I think Bond, yeah, there's so many ones that are hidden gems in the lot, and I recommend also reading the books. If you like Bond, just read the books. If you have Audible, they got an amazing set of actors to play Um,
I was gonna
Rory
say
Kinnear actually
like
voices
Dan
Rory Kinnear
Stevens,
voices
David
Bond.
Tennant, Rosamund
Yeah,
Pike.
she's in it. She's in the she does The Spy Who Loves Me, which is the only one in the lot I haven't read. I'm gonna have to pick it up. Um, but yeah, they Rory Kinnear does one. Uh, yeah, Dan Stevens
That's the
is
guy who
really, I mean, he
plays
does.
Tanner, right?
Yeah, Rory Kinnear plays Tanner. So he does one. The guy who played Gustav Graves does one, and is really, really, that's a great one that he reads. Tom Hiddleston reads one. Hugh Corshi reads Doctor No.
Another actor people want to see as Bond.
Yeah, Tom Hiddleston definitely. Um, I mean, there's like a long list, but if we're, yeah, there's, I definitely would be like, get the audiobooks for those and just read them and, just go with them. And, yeah, I think they're still worth reading. Despite all the
Okay,
problems,
here's
I
a
think they're
hard
still
one.
worth reading.
Favorite Bond villain?
Ooh. Fran Sanchez from uh, on Easy. Yeah, it's Sanchez from License to Kill.
I mean, yeah, he's a great villain, and that movie introduced us to Benicio del Toro, who was a great
Yeah,
henchman.
yeah, he's the most crazy weirdo you've ever seen, too. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
I
it's
guess it's a cop out to say Blofeld, but I mean, so
Blofeld's
besides
always
Blow,
fun.
I think my favorite Blofeld besides Telly Savalas though is the Blofeld from Russia with Love and Thunderball, where he's just the
Yeah,
mysterious figure.
yeah, you never see his face. And yeah, so there's a lot of yeah, I mean, he's good. I love the villain, or I mean, the villain. The second favorite is the villain in For Your Eyes Only.
Mm.
That one's really good too. And then third is the one the third is the one from World Is Not Enough, and then Goldeneye after that. So a lot of really great villains.
I would
As
argue that even though I love Sean Bean as 006, I think whatever Javier Bardem is doing as Silva.
Yeah, Silva is a remarkable villain. The villain in this one and the newest one, the villain in that one, he is the only Bond villain in the movies to actually put Bond through the meat grinder. Like,
Mm-hmm.
seriously put him through the meat grinder, and which happens in the book several times. And I think they always had this thing of Bond is just too, couldn't possibly be pushed to his limits and broken. No, no, no. Like action or get close to breaking. No, no. This Bond gets him. This villain really pushes him. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely, this is a good villain too. Mr. White is a great villain. Le Chiffre is a good villain. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, as over the top it is, the villain in Tomorrow Never Dies is great, and The Spy Who Loves Me, the villain in that one's really good.
Yeah, I heard they
And
originally wanted that to be Blofeld, but for some reason they didn't have the rights for a long time to use Blofeld, which is why it
that
was
doesn't surprise
Quantum
me.
instead of Spectre.
Yeah, I mean
Is
that
Jaws the best henchman or is Oddjob the best henchman?
they're both tied. Best henchman, hands down, the one is Grant. Easy.
Oh,
Grant's
well, I
easily the
think
best
he's
henchman.
just too good to be a henchman. I consider him
Yeah,
just
I
as
mean,
villainous as the other two people in the movie. I forget their names.
yeah, I mean, while he's officially a henchman, yeah, I can he kind of borders into not being his own. That's a good list of just multiple villains all together. But I would say getting Man, there's so many great villains. Okay, as incredibly over the top, and this is the Bond you show to kids, and kids love it. Moonraker is the villain in that is just so good. Michael Lonsdale, it's Michael Lonsdale. Is yeah, I'm tired. Is so good
He's a good
as the
Bond
villain in
villain.
that. It,
I, I, it's just when that movie goes to the ridiculous, I can't stay on board. When the pigeon does double takes and they're playing musical scores from famous movies, and what they do to Jaws in that movie too. It's like, I,
there's so much. Yeah, it's one of
and
those
them
things
trying to
where when you're
capulate off the Star Wars success, because that's another thing the Bond franchise does is they always like double back. Like when something gets too ridiculous, they're like, all right, the next one's got to be like down to earth, serious. He's just being a spy in this one.
yeah, but you can argue that for every film franchise that's ever existed. I don't think that's a Bond franchise only thing. That's and I think that that's honestly it's you know I think that's the Bond movie. If you're trying to get your kid into Bond, that's one of the movies you show them. And it's because it's a fun movie. And I think that more is a good starting place for a lot of people to watch Bond. Especially if they're younger, they've never seen it, and they can work into it. I mean, that's what it could just be because we're both nearly 40 years old at this point, and we're, those are the movies we all saw first before on TV before we finally got to see
Brosnan on the big screen.
Brosnan, and then Brosnan becomes our Bond. The
I
way
mean, he's technically our Bond, and I think part of the reason GoldenEye, besides what it did for the franchise, why it's such held regard in millennials, especially the older millennial group, is the video game.
Yeah, the video game really kind of changed a lot of stuff on top of that. I never played the video game because I didn't have an N64 and I've never been a first person shooter fan. Um, but it is a good game. There's no way around that. That I think is one of the reasons it
I
was
never
able to
played the newer one
spawn
where they
more.
put Craig in it.
No, I didn't play that either. I think I played it a little bit. I think I played the original once or twice. It was like, and I know it's good because it changed everything up. But I think that did help. That did help a lot. Was that that did help kind of cement Bond for a new group. Even though the game came out 2 years after, 2 year, I think 2 years after the movie came out. I think it came out right before Tomorrow Never Dies, actually. Or a year after, or something like that, because they took their time on
Oh
it
wow,
to
I
produce it. It was
don't
amazing.
remember. I just know
Yeah,
it's a
it
video
was not
game.
released at the time of the movie. They actually held it back a year so they could get it right. Um, so I think it coincided about 6 months before.
Hmm.
You know, it came out. I think a year. It came out in that because I think it was 2 years between Tomorrow Never Dies, and it came out right in the middle of that. But right in between those Tomorrow Never Dies and Goldeneye. But Goldeneye is just one of those movies that really it's both a movie that keeps with Bond and is totally a Bond movie, but at the same time it takes a different direction in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways. But it modernized Bond, it kept Bond. And talking about great openings and great theme songs. Honestly, the
Yeah,
more I
that's a
think about it,
banger.
I think that the more I think about it, it's like yes, Tomorrow Never Dies may be my favorite Bond opening, but it's really kind of hard. But it only edges out Goldeneye. You know,
All right.
um,
Favorite Bond song? I think you already said yours.
favorite. Oh Lord, I spent forever. I spent months, over a month, trying to actually do this list, and I finally realized I don't know enough about music to make a. I don't know enough about the. I realized I would need like some education and actually the building of music favorite
Okay,
Bond
well,
song
what's the one if
are
you hear it?
probably The Living Daylights. It's gonna probably be The Living Daylights. Yeah.
I mean,
But
that's
at
a
the
good
same
one.
time, yeah, The Living Daylights is probably it. But at the same time, GoldenEye and License to Kill are up there. I love Nobody Does It Better. Um,
Yeah, I
it's a
that one
great one.
really like went up
Spy
for me
Spy Who
after
Loves
Roger
Me
Moore
is yeah.
died.
Spy Who Loves Me is absolutely perfect song. I mean, it's really good. I think as I was moving, one second.
So while he's gone, I'm gonna mention a really cool story about Roger Moore, and then we're probably gonna get done here talking about James Bond, even though we went really in depth, but also kind of just briefly mentioned some things. But I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about all 25 of these movies in detail. But the late Roger Moore, who played James Bond from 1973 to 1985, was just an impeccable human being and was part of UNICEF. There was a guy who got to meet Roger Moore twice, once as a child and once as an adult. When he saw him as a child, he didn't know his name was Roger Moore. He just saw him at an airport and was like, oh my God, James Bond is at the airport. And he told his dad or grandpa, he's like, that's James Bond, that's James Bond. So the dad or grandpa goes up to Roger Moore and is like, my son says you're some sort of big deal or somebody important or you're really cool. And Roger Moore motions him over there and he's like, okay, let me give no. Well, first he does is he's like, okay, let me sign an autograph. I think he basically the guy just went up there and asked Roger Moore because his kid or grandkid was like really impressed. And so he gets the autograph and the kid's like, who's this? That's James Bond. And so the dad or grandpa goes back over to Roger Moore and he's like, apparently you didn't sign the right name or you're not, or you didn't use your real name or something. And Roger Moore motions the kid over there and he's like, you're right. I am James Bond, but I have to use an alias because Blofeld and his spies are following me and they're after me. So no one can know that I'm here. You'll keep my secret safe. I will sign James Bond, but don't tell anyone. And so he did it. And so that kid grew up to work in the film or television industry and they were shooting something I think for UNICEF, a commercial or a fundraiser or something, a organization Roger Moore was heavily involved in. And the guy came up to him and he's like, I don't think you remember this, but you did something really cool when I was a kid and I got to meet you. And I just want to say thank you for doing that. And he was like, oh, okay. And then when they got done filming and doing their whatever they were commercial or fundraiser, Roger Moore came up to him and he's like, I do remember you. But remember, Blofeld and his spies are always after me. And I gotta keep my identity secret.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I apologize about that. Yeah, that is great. Of course, he's in Cannonball Run too, as you know. Yeah.
Isn't that the joke where he's like, I'm Roger Moore or something?
No, I'm the actor who plays Roger Moore, who plays James Bond, or something like that. It was I can't remember how it works, but of course, Cannonball Run, due to some licensing agreements, is not in print at the moment, which is an
That's
absolute
weird.
shame. Yeah, well, it was done by two different studios, so two different studios on the right apparently. So
Ah,
that's why you get Cannonball 2, but you can't get Cannonball Run or Cannonball Run 1. Um, so we'll wait and see what happens if they ever re-release that because he was one of the best parts of that movie. But
speaking
what
of
I want to
which,
know,
Cannonball Run. You do know they tried to cast Burt Reynolds as James Bond, and he was like,
yeah,
"No."
he was like, yeah, he was like, no, no. He was like, no, and then God, what are we running with? Uh, it was yeah. They also there's someone else they tried to cast and he couldn't do it, and apparently Liam Neeson, I think they were talks to cast, and apparently his wife was not going to have it.
Sam Neill
Um,
came really close too,
Same deal came. There were a lot of
back
people
in
who
the
came
'80s.
close to him. Yeah, there were a lot of people who screen tested and done it. So that's why I honestly think Cavill might have a shot, just because he must have really impressed him. So it's
Yeah,
going
I
to be
wouldn't
real
be
interesting to
surprised,
see.
and I'd be okay with that. But I would like to see
100%.
something more interesting. Not that he would be bad. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think he'd be the safe choice, but there's a lot of different people they could take, and you know, there are a lot of people they could do, and it's one of those things where people talk about who's going to be this, who's going to be that, and the Broccoli's have always just picked somebody no one thought was going to be picked. So it's one of those things where I don't hold any stock when you hear who's going to be this or that or the other. You know,
Yeah, we'll
um,
see when we see, and I'm sure they'll do something interesting and something different than all the previous actors. As far as Bond songs, I guess I'm gonna be basic. Mine's Goldfinger. I mean,
it's kind of hard to look. Can you really mess with anything Shirley Bassey does? "Diamonds Are Forever" is one of my favorite songs.
that's the best
That's
part of that movie. Now, I'm not a big
yeah,
fan of the Moonraker song, but that's not her fault. It's kind of hard to make a cool song off of Moonraker.
yeah. People, okay. This song does not. Sometimes the thing about those songs is sometimes a song fits the film perfectly. Sometimes the
Mm-hmm.
song is like I think they get split up in a couple of categories. The ones that match the film perfectly, the ones that are kind of a classic feel to them, that like anything Shirley Bassey does, it would be an example of that. I think "No Time to Die" follows in that example. I think Tina Turner's "Goldeneye"
Yeah,
follows into that. And yeah,
I
don't get me
believe
wrong.
so. Yeah,
And
that's
then
why I
you have
love
the
those
ones
songs
that
so
are
much because they're of that.
yeah, and then you have the ones that are more romantic, and those are really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the ones that are just flat out bangers. That are just like "The World Is Not Enough." "Man with the Golden Gun" is the archetypical example of this. "You Know My Name." Those are all in that category. Uh,
Oh, I would
but yeah,
put
I can't.
Adele's Skyfall in those classic of the
Yeah,
Goldfinger.
Adele "Skyfall" falls into that. No way, no. "Another Way to Die" falls into the banger category, is what I call it. What I call it. And then the uh, um, "Casino Royale" "Spectre" falls in the classic category. And then let's see.
Oh, yeah, I'm not a big fan
Yeah,
of that song with the movie. Like,
yeah. It doesn't.
and
It doesn't match the movie. It doesn't. It's one of
it
those
won
ones
an
that doesn't match the
Oscar.
movie. It's not a bad song. It's not a bad song, but it does
It's
not match the
okay.
movie. But if you want to see the one that doesn't match the movie but is really, really, really strong, "License to Kill" does not match the movie in any
That's
way, shape, or
true.
form. It is thematically 100% different from if you were just listening to that song, you would think it'd be an entirely different movie. It doesn't matter. It is so good. I love that. And I always go good because when I really like something. But it's a great song. I love that song. And so it doesn't match the movie, but it goes to one of my favorite movies too. So it's kind of one of those weird things. It's kind of like "Kiss from a Rose" and "Batman Forever." They do not go together at all, and they don't work together at
Oh,
all, but
that
somehow they
song
work perfectly
rocks.
together. Yeah, that song rocks. Yeah, it's like, and no one's, and to this day, still no one knows what it's about. You ask the writers what it's about, they can't tell you what "Kiss from a Rose" is about. You ask Seal what it's about, I don't have a clue what it's about. You ask the recording man is
That's my
about, I don't know what
favorite
it's
part
about.
of Batman Forever when they play that song at the end. I'm like, you know
Yeah,
what?
it's a
I have
great
issues
song.
with this
Yeah,
movie, but this song, yeah, worth it.
amazing. But yeah, it's like talking about, of course, that's the thing. It's like if you can redo Batman and relaunch it 10 million ways, you can redo Bond and relaunch it. The character is always going to be the character, and the character will always translate in some capacity. And that's what I think I like about it. Um,
All right,
you
I
know,
think
it,
we're in agreement here. I think we already said it, but I'll ask it. Favorite Bond girl?
I just told you it was a tie between Dalton, Craig, and Lazenby.
Oh, not your
I
favorite
mean,
Bond. I said Bond girl.
oh, Bond girl. I didn't hear Bond girl. Oh yeah, yeah. It's gonna be Diana Rigg.
I know, and
Yeah,
I got into an argument with my brother last year about this. Like he said I was ridiculous, and I was like, "Well, are you rating these characters on their character, or I mean these actors on the the character they portrayed, or are you rating them on who you think's attractive? Because that's a totally different thing. And I'm like, Diana Rigg is an amazing actress, and she does so much for this movie. And why isn't Mrs. Bond number one?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, it's and honestly, yeah, it's like she is. That is such a great character, and Diana Rigg is so good in that movie, and captures this absolutely melancholy character that is so broken. In other words, perfect for Bond because he is so broken, you know. And they really are. It's such a remarkable thing that they did with that movie and what they pulled off. And she is so central to that. She's just so good in that movie. And I think that it's yeah, I think she's definitely my favorite. Um,
Absolutely. I think the only one that comes close to me is Eva Green as Vesper, as far
yeah,
as
Eva
to
Green
that
as Vesper
level.
probably. She is also remarkable. You know, uh, stupid name aside, the girl who played Triple X was a really strong, great character. She was awesome. Uh,
Yeah,
I I loved
I
her.
think that's the first time we got like a Bond girl of that magnitude too. That's like of the same profession and could
Yeah, it's
maybe
like that was
take Bond in a
really
fight.
yeah, absolutely could take Bond in a fight, and they outdo. They're always one upping each other throughout the thing. She's definitely this. I think she's really up there. She's someone who the lady in For Your Eyes Only is another really strong one.
Yeah,
You know, she's really
that
good.
comes to my issue with some of the Roger Moore ones. I wish that they wouldn't have had him like with that one in A View to a Kill for sure. I wish they didn't have him sleep with the Bond girl at the end of the
Yeah,
movie.
honestly, you could have less sleeping altogether. I'd be perfectly fine. Um, uh, but I think yeah, no, but I mean, it's like uh, uh I just absolutely yeah. I think that there's been so many great strong Bond characters and Bond actresses, and
I
they've
want to give
always
a
casted well in those.
shout out to three characters when people don't think of Bond girls. The first one, of course, is the wonderful Lois Maxwell, and now Naomi Harris as Miss
Oh
Moneypenny.
yeah. Oh my gosh, Naomi Harris is so good. And Lois Maxwell, of course, was always good, and Judy Dench was always good. Um, and then we say I'm pretty sure they, like we always use Bond girl. It's a dated term. They're not using it anymore, and it doesn't matter. But they've always casted some really great female leads in those
And I
movies.
want to give a shout out to two Bond villainesses, the lady from Thunderball
Yeah,
and
Volpa.
Famke Janssen as Xenia Onatop in Goldeneye.
Yeah. Oh, she is scary. She is so scary. Though, admittedly, I'll say this: I actually think that I think it's Volpa is how they
Uh-huh.
say it. It means fox. She's really scary. She's like someone it's like you met her, like I'm not messing with this lady. She is clearly dangerous. You know, she is a grade A threat. You
Which
know,
I think those two actors are so good in their role that I think they overshadow the main female lead in both those films.
yeah, yeah, they do, Okay, if
Which
we're gonna go for supporting characters, number one of all time that is not a repeat character is going to be Boris from Goldeneye.
oh, yeah, Alan
Diamond in
Cumming
the Saloon.
introduced us to Alan Cumming.
Yep. Oh my gosh,
I
he's
would say
so
my
good in that.
favorite, I forget the actor's name. I forget his last name. It's Pedro something. The guy from Russia with Love. He's probably my
Yeah,
favorite
yeah,
supporting
he's really
character.
good. He's really, yeah, for supporting character. Um, yeah, when you get henchmen, that's when you get into really on top's going to be really high up there, along with Odd Job and Jaws and Grant and the I do not remember his name in Goldeneye.
Oh,
The
the general.
general. Yeah, what is his name? Uh,
And I just
Isham?
watched this
Is
one
that it?
not
Is
too
it
long
Isham?
ago.
He's really good. He's a great. Yeah, he's great. I mean, there's so many good. But a Bond villain is pretty much only as good as his Bond. The Bond henchman is just as necessary as the Bond villain. You know,
Yeah, but sometimes the henchmen are more memorable than the actual villain.
yeah,
Though GoldenEye
they
is
are. They are.
an
But
example of a good collection, like From Russia with Love, where
yeah,
all the villains are
and
good.
yeah, I agree. And Robert Carlyle's not bad at all, though he doesn't get as much screen time as you'd expect. Um,
No,
you know,
he's solid.
he's solid.
I,
Yeah,
I I just think there's a more
Gunther
interesting
from Tomorrow
character in
Never
that
Dies is
movie.
really high. Do what?
Oh, I was just saying there's a more interesting character than Robert Carlyle in The World Is Not Enough.
Yeah, Gunther and is it? I think it's Gunther and Tomorrow Never Dies is another great one.
Hmm. Well, I think we've gotten more than sweaty today talking about why we love this franchise, good, bad, and ugly. I think it's gonna be here. It's gonna outlive all of us. There
And
are gonna be
probably,
people.
yeah, like
There are gonna be
yeah,
people in 100 years like talking about James Bond still.
yeah. Same way they'll be
And
talking about Sherlock Holmes and Batman and all the others. I think they've officially made a timeless character. At least I hope they have. Um, though I just want to ask one other question:
sure.
Who, if you could name a director to pick up the next Bond movie, who would you go with?
You know, we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago and we named some interesting choices. And maybe this person will not make it because I don't know if they're going to make any more movies, but because I would love to see a female director's take on a Bond film, and because this female director has done action films so well, and she has like kind of peeled away the tropes of masculinity, especially in her action films. I would love to see Catherine Bigelow do a Bond film.
Yeah, same. If we're going to get an American director, she would be my top choice. I will always be the one that hopes someday, somehow, maybe Kenneth Branagh will get to direct. I just that is my dream. Hope. I don't hold any stock in it because his name has never popped up, but I would love to see Kenneth Branagh direct. I think Phoebe Waller Bridge is a good choice. I would love to see Taika again. I'm trying not to butcher her name. Watiki, is that how you pronounce his last
Watiti,
name? Watiti. Yeah,
Watiti.
yeah. Watiti, Taika Watiti, I think would be a great choice. Edgar Wright would be good. Campbell coming back would be great. There's so many great choices they could go with. Um, you know, uh, but if we're doing an American director, I think Bigelow's probably the best choice you could go with. Um,
Uh, what do you think of Steve McQueen doing a Bond film?
okay, I've only seen like one of his movies, but yeah, he would be a good choice. He would be a great choice.
I know he's
Um,
mostly known for his dramas, but he did a really well-made crime film that no one saw called Widows, which was written by Gillian Flynn, who wrote Gone Girl. So I think he could do
yeah.
something really well done with the action.
Who directed Gone Girl?
David Fincher.
Fincher, yeah. Fincher is a great director, but I don't think he'd be the right choice.
I don't want Fincher for a
I
Bond
think that's
film.
I think that's the least Fincher movie. That's why I think I didn't recognize it as Fincher because it's the least Fincher movie of any of his movies.
Uh,
Yeah,
Gone Girl or Girl with the Dragon Tattoo?
Gone Girl. You can at
Oh,
least see the cinematography, and you can see a cinematography in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
that's
Um,
true.
yeah, I honestly, I think, yeah, any of those would be good. Um, I think, oh, I know Spielberg always wanted to direct one, and there's part of me who'd be like, Spielberg, maybe
What
give him a chance, even though he hasn't.
funny thing? Spielberg, of course, tried to make one back in the 70s and 80s, and he kept getting turned down. And I think he wrote Albert Broccoli around the time after he got the Oscar for Schindler's List, and was like,
Yeah.
"I'm still up for a Bond movie," and he's like, "I can't afford you now."
Well, who knows? They got Amazon's money now. They got Amazon's
Exactly.
money now. Yeah. It's like, oh, how much
And I
money do you
think
need?
Spielberg's at the point of his life where he's like, because he's doing a musical, he might be like, well, I never got to do one. Let me do one.
Hey, if they offered it to him, it'd be good. He knows what he's doing. I don't. I just think there's just this part of me. It's like Kenneth Branagh is the one I've always wanted to see directed because he's probably my favorite director, Western director, and I really love his stuff. I would love to see it. I don't think it's ever going to happen. But Edgar Wright and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Catherine Bigelow, Taika Waititi, that all of them are just the ones my brain keeps going back to. And they're going to pick someone entirely different, than any of these. But I would love to see. Those would be the ones I'd love to see. But Steve McQueen could be really good too. I mean, Steve McQueen could be a great choice. Um, yeah, there's so many different people they could grab. But then again, there's probably some directors who have done
We
very
don't know
small
yet. Or been stage
you know,
stuff that could do it. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's probably directors on the radar that none of us ever think of that could easily pick it up. I mean, you know, uh, yeah, I mean, I imagine they're probably going to go with this is just my guess, but I think they're going to probably go with, not maybe necessarily an established director, but someone they've worked with before in some capacity. They tend to do
I
that.
would be okay with that, like you were saying, because I think there's as much as the Craig era did so much to elevate and change the franchise. I also think by bringing in bigger name directors, sometimes it ramps up the anticipation and expectation of the movie.
Yeah, and I think it can detract maybe detract from the from what makes it. I think that could also be it because both Skyfall and No Time to Die are in a way departures from the typical formula in
Mhm.
certain aspects, and they're both really good. Skyfall especially, but I also think that having I think that a return to form, I think would be really good. And going back to kind of a more classic take Bond would be a good choice. I mean, we've gone through the Bourne era. We reinvented things for Bourne. Now there's other ways to do it. We can go back. So I think there's so many things they can do, and Bond's a timeless character, so there's just ways to go around it. I have no idea. I'm just throwing out guesses. It's just like, but everyone always guesses on what they're going to do and they never do what you expect. So that's the
Well,
part I love about this.
I saw a meme that was like James Bond has to be the only job you have that the whole time you're doing it, everyone's just talking about who should do your job next.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was hilarious when
Here's
people got so confused when in Skyfall they actually show Bond's estate and they confirm that James Bond is not a code name and everyone freaks the heck out. And I'm like, yeah, James Bond's never been a code name. 007 is a code name. That's why someone else
Mm-hmm.
can play 007, but you'll never get another person playing, but you'll never have someone being James Bond who's not James Bond. That's a
And
person,
I
you know?
know they wanted Connery to play Kincaid, and I think a lot of people would have loved it, but because James Bond is his name, I think it was wiser that they got Albert Finney.
I agree. I agree. And also by that point, Connery has been very kind, has just decided to go off and do whatever he does, do whatever he did. And I think he was just getting to fully enjoy retirement and having a good time, and
Mm-hmm.
when you lost
And
him,
I
it's a
think
real
it
shame.
his mental health or his physical health wasn't that strong in his last
Yeah,
5 or
I
10
saw a
years of his
photo. I'm
life.
pretty sure I saw a photo of him where he had thinned out a lot, but Connery just got to live out his years and enjoy himself and have a good time. And when he retired, I went, "That's fine. He's done everything. He's done his stuff." So yeah,
Yeah. Um Now that reminds me, so I got two more things I want to ask. Do you think any of the MI6 team will return, or do you think
I
they'll completely reboot the franchise?
I really hope they don't. I hope they don't that get rid of that crew.
Yeah, I
I
love
really
that
hope they don't.
crew, and
Unless I mean, if they decide to shoot everything back to the 1960s or something, which I think is the least likely they're going to do, it would kind of logically be difficult for them to do that. Then I could see them
hmm
doing that. But if they're just continuing on, no, just keep the group you got. Dump
yeah,
the cash in to make it happen.
you got good
Like
actors in the roles,
And
so
yeah,
yeah, keep them.
it's one of the best parts. Yeah, absolutely. I would want them to stay. I was thinking about this the other night. Like, I would hate to see someone not be. I'd hate to see those people not being the same people. I would love to see all of them carry over.
And then final thing, which is a fan theory, which some people say is ridiculous, and they think this Craig era has put an end to this theory. But there are a lot of people who think the Michael Bay movie, The Rock, Sean Connery's character is basically just an old James Bond in that movie.
That's just a fun little thing because he was clearly playing a British spy. But no, of course, there's no hidden connection between those two. I can't imagine there being unless it was a total tongue in cheek. But come on, The Rock is amazing. Let's just settle it. Like, if you've never seen The Rock, go watch The Rock. Um,
And apparently, Michael Bay did not get to direct on Sean Connery's acting because Sean Connery looked at him and said, "Why don't you just go blow up a building?"
oh God, yeah, it's yeah. Then if Sean Connery says something, you don't. What was that scene in the getting off topic, but talking about actors who are like that in the shootist
Oh, yes,
yeah,
Don
well,
Siegel wanted John Wayne to shoot somebody in the back in that final shootout scene in the bar. And John Wayne's like, "I'm John Wayne. I'm not going to shoot anyone in the back." And Don Siegel had done so many movies with Clint Eastwood. He's like, "Well, Clint Eastwood would do it." He's like, "I don't care what that kid would do." Of course, Clint Eastwood's like in his 40s at that point, but
but yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, there's so many directions they can go, and it's going to be real fascinating to see what they do. So yeah,
well, I think we've gone in depth without really talking about each film individually, but I mean it's 25 movies. But before I
yeah,
let you go, what is it about this franchise that keeps you coming back? Even
they're just
when
fun.
something doesn't work for you,
They're
like
just
I think you
fun.
said you don't
It's
really dislike any of them, but you admit that you like some less than others.
well, yeah, it's human nature. Bond, there's something special about it. A combination of childhood memories with just loving the formula, loving the adventures, and yeah, they're action movies, but they're also lean very heavy into the adventure aspect of it. And I always love that. And, there's always, they can always be different, but always be the same at the same time. And they can do a single movie and and then you can go to the next one. So you don't have to follow 17 different things to understand what's going on. You could just pick it up and you could watch it, and then you can go watch another one. And then there's very little connection between any of them. And you don't get lost, and it's a reliable fun thing. There's just some sort of emotional thing about it, attachment. I Asking me why I like it, I'm literally throwing out guesses. It's just good. It's just, what you like when you like it. But
Yeah, I think what you said, it's fun, it's reliable, you know what you're gonna get most of the time when you watch it, and if you like it, you like it, and it's kinda cool that we are talking about it at this point of the year because, as you mentioned at the beginning, like, that's kinda how I got introduced to Bond was, like, those marathons on TBS and then Spike during Thanksgiving.
oh yeah, it's like we were gonna have them, and I miss those these days because like I can't sit those little cousins down of mine and get them to watch those movies and be like, watch this, and then leave us alone. I love my little cousins to death, but let's face it, sometimes you just like, you know, thankfully a lot of them are getting old enough now that you don't have to worry about that. But it's like, yeah, I'm like, you are missing out on good stuff. Go watch this, have fun. Um,
Well
yeah,
Well, thanks for suggesting of doing a Bond episode and coming on and just going crazy for a conversation that we probably would have otherwise. But it was a lot of fun, and I always am up to talk Bond. You're probably the only person that will talk Bond with me this much.
yeah. I think we've been continuously having these conversations since at least 2005 minimum.
Yeah, as I
We
said,
have
I
probably
think the
talked ad
only
nauseum on this more than any other franchise ever in our entire friendship together for all these years.
I would
But
argue
yeah,
maybe we've talked more about Batman, but
yeah, Batman we've talked more about, but otherwise, yeah, I think, yeah, if we were to do another franchise thing, I think that'd be the one we should talk about.
well, yeah, I think that's how we bonded for the beginning of our friendship was Batman, and then we
Yeah,
found out we both liked Bond, and then you brought me
yeah.
into the Doctor Who universe. So,
I am sorry that I have infected you with so many wonderful things. Now I should get you interested in fountain pens and ink and see how you like that. Yeah. Then let's start talking about the hard drugs now. Fountain pens and ink. Yeah.
oh,
Then
I
you can
don't
go
know if
off
I
and
can
buy
do a
your
nearly 3 hour
7,000
podcast
monographic.
on fountain pens.
Hey, you know what? You can get your $7,000 monographic James Bond fountain pen. Yeah, like
Oh,
that's actually a recreation. If I remember correctly, they did one that was a literal recreation of the Golden Gun at one point.
that's cool. Um,
Yeah.
that movie's a mess, but I love Christopher Lee, and apparently he was related to Ian Fleming.
Is there nothing that Christopher Lee didn't do? I mean, it's like not connected to. Oh,
Nope, and he actually gave notes on Lord of the Rings of like, cause he's like, that's not
yeah.
the sound a man would make when they're stabbed to death. And Peter Jackson's like, well, how do you know? He's like, cause I've stabbed a man to death.
Yeah. There's an endless string of things that always will prove that he is more badass than you will ever be. Yeah.
A
Oh
metal
Lord.
singer being one of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the second Bond movie I saw, and I still love it. I mean, it is thematically, it's probably not, it's like, but come on, it's great. It's a great movie. Um,
Well,
and Christopher Lee's fantastic. But
thanks
yeah,
for
it's
spending.
yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on, suggesting this, because I know you wanted to talk about Bond, and yeah, I wasn't planning on doing a Bond show anytime recently, but hey, we did it. And maybe one day we'll do a show where we actually talk about the movies more and then just talking about the fandom and the franchise. But,
Oh yeah.
it's
Yeah.
too much to
I would
go into
rather pick
detail.
one. I think if we did that, we should just pick one and just run with it. But okay, I just think I realized that if we just stuck around for another 2 minutes, we will have reached the exact screen time of No Time to Die.
Oh, okay.
I
Let's
think it runs
ramble
to
for
48. I think it runs to 48, and we're at 2:44. We've either passed
yeah.
it or just about.
What?
Yeah, like yeah, it's crazy. I mean, yeah, I don't know. We want to stick around and do that. We can call it quits either or. I don't know.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
I could try and ramble on, but then we might run longer.
yeah, yeah. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Oh, geez. But no, you've got all this. I don't know. I don't know what else we could talk about. Yeah. Oh, we've actually surpassed it by 2 minutes.
We did it.
We
Okay.
did it. We are now the longest running Bond talk ever. Like or one of the longest running ones. We've done it. Yeah.
Take that,
Um.
Carrie Fukunawa.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And just like that, we will probably be back talking about James Bond again one day because it's here forever, I think.
Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. It's like Betty White. It's kind of hard to kill. Um. So yeah. All right. I'll catch you later.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and I enjoyed talking to you anytime about anything. Maybe I guess in March we'll do a 3-hour Batman discussion.
Oh Lord. Oh Lord. Yeah. Oh boy. 3 hour Batman discussion. That'll be fantastic. Try to keep it under that though. I think Batman, we don't have to run through 60 years of history. We can cut it down a little more, I think.
We could.
We could, yeah. But no, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Of course,
You
if we're
have
gonna
a
do
good
that,
rest of your weekend.
yeah, same
What
with
was
you. Of
that?
course, if we're gonna go there for actors who people were completely freaking out when they got cast, you had both Michael Keaton and Robert Pattinson there. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then when the trailers come out, everyone's like, "Oh, okay."
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So yeah, that's why I'm always like, if they cast somebody, it's generally these people know what they're doing. So yeah, I will. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
And you're always welcome.
No.
Goodbye.